And I think we're live now, so we're ready to start the meeting. Please bear with me, panel. I'm just standing in for the regular chair for 10 minutes while he deals with an emergency item. So he should be reappearing very shortly. I believe that all the expected members and officers are present. Are you ready to begin? Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of City Plans panel. My name is Councillor Caroline Gruen, and as I've just explained, I'm standing in for Councillor McKenna for the first part of the meeting. Could I remind everyone that we are holding this meeting in a way that is COVID secure and in accordance with the new social distancing guidelines, which means everyone is present and appropriately spread out and has been allocated a specific seat. Today's meeting is being live streamed on the City Council's YouTube channel so that the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. City Plans panel deals with the applications from the city centre as well as the largest and most significant applications the councils receive. The aim of the panel is to hear all the relevant information from applicants, members of the public and council officers to help members of the panel make their decision. Before I begin, could I remind members that the 90 minutes rule has been removed, but it would be good practice that if the room gets to a temperature that makes staff and visitors uncomfortable, then a welfare break might be needed to allow the room to ventilate. Could I now invite members and officers to introduce themselves and mute your microphone once you've introduced yourself? And if we could start from my left, Daljit, please.
Hello everyone, I'm Daljit Singh. I lead the City Centre planning team.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Elizabeth Nash from Hunslet and Riverside.
Good afternoon everyone, Councillor Peter Carlill from Carverley and Farsley.
Good afternoon, Councillor Al Garthwaite, Headingley and Hyde Park.
Hello everybody, Councillor Neil Walshaw, Headingley and Hyde Park.
Good afternoon everyone, Councillor Kayleigh Brooks, Little London and Woodhouse Ward.
Good afternoon, everybody. David Feeney, Chief Planning Officer for Leeds.
Good afternoon, Stephen Varley, Design Officer.
Good afternoon, Councillor David Blackburn, Farnley and Worley Ward.
Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Dan Cohen from the Woodley Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Paul Wadsworth from Guiseley and Rawdon Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Graham Latty, also from Guiseley and Rawdon.
Thank you very much, members. So now we can move to item number 1. Clark is going to take that for us. John?
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under item 2, there are no items which require the exclusion of the press or public. Agenda item number 3, I am unaware of any late items of business. Under agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any interest they may have?
I don't see any indications.
I'll assume there are no interests. Item number 5, apologies for absence. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Campbell and Councillor Finnegan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So item number 6, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, which we held on the 5th of August. Do members accept that these are a true and accurate record? And I'll assume you do, unless otherwise indicated. And so if we then move to matters arising, are there any matters arising from the minutes that anybody would like to raise at this point? And again, I can see no indications, so we can move on to item 8, which is our first substantive item, application 190208, an application which seeks planning consent for resident development and ancillary flexible commercial space on Ellaby Road.
Thank you, Chair. Toby, you might want to move the slide on, please. Thank you. This item is brought to Plans Panel following a deferral in October 2020, with members expressing concern regarding a number of issues. Following the panel meeting, a design workshop was held with panel members in April this year in order for the applicants to better understand members' concerns. It is considered that the applicants have responded positively to these concerns, and following a brief description of the site and context, I intend to focus on the changes to the proposals since the last presentation to panel. If we can move to the next slide, please. Members will recall this application proposal is for residential development at vacant sites at Bow Street, East Street and Ellaby Road on the edge of the city centre. It's highlighted in red on this slide. The site is divided into two parcels with the larger piece on the south side of Bow Street and a smaller piece of land to the north of Bow Street. The site is allocated for housing development in the local plan. Next slide, please. This slide shows the site again shaded in red, but within the context of the surrounding buildings. It includes the Grade 1 listed St. Saviour's Church to the top right of the red site area in this shot. In the foreground is East Street and the larger scale former waterfront mill buildings, such as the Grade 2 listed Rose Wharf. And to the north, which is to the left of this slide, is the Bow Street Recreation Ground, which is a council-owned green space. If we can go on to the next slide, please. This slide shows photos of views into and out of the site. We did have a member site visit this morning, and for those that made it, just bear with me. I thought it would be useful to show these again for those that couldn't make it. So this slide shows a top image, which is from East Street, taken from the roof of Rose Wharf. And it shows the topography rising from East Street to eastwards towards what is a new residential development at the top of the hill on Ellaby Road. The bottom left image is the flank of St. Saviour's Vicarage facing the southeast corner of the site. And image 3, which is to the bottom in the middle right, is a view looking from Ellaby Road down the hill towards Rose Wharf. If we can go to the next slide, please. And this slide shows photos of the wide variety of building scales, materials, and architectural styles in the area, including the red brick larger scale mill buildings and the stone buildings associated with St. Saviour's Church, Boyd's Mill, and the buff coloured modern block of flats, which are known as Public House. If we can go to the next slide, please. In October, members raised, as I said, a number of concerns with the previous proposals. This slide seeks to summarise those and highlights the areas where members raised particular concern. Briefly, members wanted to see an improved facade treatment to the buildings. The feeling at the time was that the facade treatments were too uniform. Members wanted to see an improved relationship to East Street, with some members asking for a greater setback to East Street. Members also wanted to see an improved appearance to the central parking area and the central amenity space, which is a courtyard area between the three blocks on this image, depicted as numbers 5 and 7 and 4. And members also raised concerns about the level of affordable housing that was being proposed and wanted to see an increase in the number of affordable units. If we can go to the next slide, please. So, as I said, in response, the architects and developers held a design workshop with panel members to better understand those concerns. And in that workshop, they noted that the key views through the site of St. Saviour's Church must be retained, and that's indicated as a principle on the left-hand side of this slide. They also noted that vehicle and pedestrian routes had to be provided through the site, and that there was a particular constraint in this respect, in that the entry was off Bow Street at the junction, close to the junction with East Street. They tabled a tripartite elevational treatment, and I'll provide more details on that in the presentation. But the third image here from the left shows that approach as a principle. And then finally, through testing alternative options, it was proposed that one additional story could be accommodated within 2 of the blocks, known as blocks A and B, without harming the wider character of the area or the key views of the listed church. If we can go to the next slide, please. So in terms of providing more details on that response, this slide shows an overview of the proposed site layout as it is presented now. It's a response to the concerns raised regarding the appearance of the courtyard car park area. The number of car parking spaces is 124. This site is proposing now 345 flats. So the level of parking is not at the maximum level, and it seeks to ensure that there's sufficient space available for greening and landscaping. The slide also shows soft landscape terrace public realm, which will be provided between the car park area and the northern edge of the site on Ellaby Road. And this will be enhanced with a new pedestrian route from Ellaby Road dropping down through the site and out onto East Street, and enhanced with approximately 40 new trees within the courtyard arrangement. Also, the 4 rows of surface car parking in the central courtyard are now proposed to be laid out as grasscrete instead of tarmac, and this would soften the appearance of the car park. If we can go to the next slide, please. The second main change to the proposal, again in response to members' concerns, is the approach to the electric vehicle charging points. Adopted policy for residential development is that 100% parking provision should be served for residential schemes with electric vehicle charging points. Previously, due to viability constraints, the proposal was to only provide 31 electric vehicle charging points. The applicants now propose to increase the capacity in the substation to allow for the provision of 31 charging points at the completion of development, but also future-proof provision for a further 72 spaces to be enabled with electric vehicle charging points by including substation capacity, cabling and ducting at this stage. That future delivery would be controlled through monitoring of the travel plan, but ultimately there could be 103 electrical vehicle charging spaces provided on the site. So that's an improved position from last time. If we can go to the next slide, please. This shows how the applicant has responded in terms of the affordable housing and viability issue. As I said, the members was looking for an increase in that level of provision, and the response from the applicant is that they can provide an additional story of accommodation on 2 of the blocks, and the top slide shows the relationship of block B. Across, it's a section through the site as it goes up the hill, and the blue shaded area is the additional story. In outline is the public house, existing block of flats on the right-hand side at the top of the hill. And by providing this additional story on this block and the other block that fronts East Street, they're able to increase the accommodation overall to 23 additional units. Now, previously, the applicants had offered 8 discounted rent flats. This is going to be a build-to-rent development, so they were offering, in line with the flexibility in our policy, 8 discounted rental flats. And that had been supported through independent viability testing by the district valuer. However, by increasing the amount of accommodation on the site, the applicants are proposing that with the additional 23 flats, they can offer a further 10 affordable units, bringing the total discounted rental units to 18 in total. In terms of, although that improves the viability position from the applicant's point of view, in terms of the impact of that on surrounding neighbouring uses and developments, officers consider the extra floor is still acceptable. Although it's only 10 metres away from the public house development, as I will go on to show later, in plan form, it's offset from the existing blocks of flats at the top of the hill. Can we go to the next slide, please? This slide shows, again, the relationship between the proposed buildings and the existing in a wider context along East Street, with the additional extra stories shown in the drawings. It demonstrates that the increase in massing to the blocks would still remain in keeping with the general character and massing of the East Street area. If we can go to the next slide, please. The other concern that members had was the approach to the facade treatment of the buildings. This slide shows the variety in the surrounding context, and that it's a mixture of red brick and natural stone finishes, from the old mill buildings of Rose Wharf and East Street Mills to the natural stone of Boyd's Mill and St. Saviour's Church. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this slide shows the applicant's response to members' concerns, and they've responded with a number of changes to the facade treatment that aim to introduce variety. Firstly, for the red brick buildings, so 2 of the blocks will be red brick, blocks A and C. These would contain recessed full height windows with a gold aluminium splayed panel, which adds interest and creates shadow lines. They've also introduced stack bonded brick detailing in the middle floors between the windows. In the middle, and they've also introduced brick corbelling at the top of the ground floor, and then in the middle and top of the facade to again define the order or that tripartite treatment of the elevation. If we can go to the next slide, please. The same detailing approach would be given to the alternative light stone-coloured brick facades, which are proposed for blocks B and D, in order to give cohesion and continuity. But the stone-coloured brick would provide a contrast with the red brick and also help to complement the stone finish to Boyd's Mill and St. Saviour's Church. Overall, we think this actually does provide more variety within the site and less of a uniform appearance. If we can go to the next slide, please. And so there are some computer generated images which hope to emphasize that and demonstrate that. So we have 2 stone colored blocks, the buff colored brick next to Boyd's Mill here in this shot, and then the red brick facing East Street to the left. You can go to the next slide, please. This is a view taken from Ellaby Road, looking down the slope towards the central courtyard. It shows the extensive greening that's now proposed, the tree planting, and again, the different treatment to the blocks. You can go to the next slide, please. This slide is looking at the northwest corner of the main site from within the courtyard towards the access with block C, which is on the left. And you can see the buildings on East Street beyond and the curve of block A to the right. If we go to the next slide, please. Finally, in terms of completing the response to members' concerns, this slide shows the relationship of the site access to the red line boundary of the development site. So you can see in terms of a larger piece of land, there's very limited opportunity for putting a site access in between the East Street junction and then the eastern limit of the site. Now, some members in October 2020 had asked for the building facing East Street to be set back into the site to allow opportunities for further greening. But that wouldn't be possible without compromising that site access. And then we would have a very different scheme and potentially a lot less development and a less viable scheme on the site. If we can go to the next slide, please. However, the applicant has responded by noting that the ground floor treatment to block C, and it's shown coloured here in purple and light blue, would contain their proposed ancillary commercial units and the management office and residents community facilities. And officers consider that will provide an active frontage, which is currently lacking from frontages along East Street. If we can go to the next slide, please. Also, the footway along the site frontage would be widened. Members will have noticed this morning that the footway is a lot narrower than the proposed 4 meters. And this would enable not only a better pedestrian experience, but also a cycle route to be provided along East Street. If we can go to the next slide, please. And then this is a CGI of that ground floor treatment, combined ground floor treatment with the active frontages and the enhanced width of the footway. There's also an opportunity to include some planting within planters within the recesses of the window bays. If we can go to the next slide, please. And this is a final slide showing the street scene as it would appear along East Street, looking towards the city centre. And it shows the relationship of blocks C and A in the foreground and the increased height to block A at the corner of Bow Street. So although it's the curved block is a story higher, we still think it's acceptable within this street context. Finally, we have, Chair, received a couple of late comments. We've received one late objection from a local resident living in the public house scheme. They expressed concerns that the revisions would not address panel's previous concerns in their view. And in fact, the changes exacerbate their own earlier concerns, which they had articulated on the previous proposals. They're of the view that the architecture remains uninspiring, that there would be a loss of views from public house across the site, that the increase in height by 1 story to 2 of the buildings would lead to an unacceptable loss of daylight and sunlight, that the proposals would have an adverse impact on the setting of St. Saviour's Church, that there has been a lack of consultation between the developer and the residents. They still have concerns about the appearance of the car park in the centre of the site, and they make a statement that affordable housing is being sacrificed on the site for the sake of developers' profit. In response, Toby, can we go to slide 9, please? Yes, thank you. So the public house is, I'm going to see if I can point with this. Can members still hear me? So this is public house, and this is block B, which is the closest block to the development, and the gap there is about 10 meters. And although this building has gone up in height by a story, because it's offset, this is a car park area. For those members that were on site, we were standing here. Because it's offset from the main window elevations of public house, officers feel that there wouldn't be an unacceptable relationship to the residents within this block, especially when you consider that the site levels drop significantly down towards East Street, and that the orientation of this is actually, this is north facing this way, I think. And so that is east, and the sun will come round this way, track round this way. And this is quite a generous courtyard space. You know, with the gap to block D is some 30 odd meters. So it's at least double that to the building at the bottom facing East Street. So in that context, we feel the relationship is acceptable. In terms of the loss of views, as members will know, the loss of uninterrupted views across a vacant allocated development site is not a material planning consideration. The very act of development is that it changes views from surrounding areas. However, the key view from East Street, as I said earlier, the key view from East Street of St. Saviour's Church through the site would still be retained. And then the other concerns that have been raised relating to the appearance of the car park, the architecture of the properties, and the affordable housing position, I've already addressed in my presentation. We've also received one other comment. It's from a local resident, a Leeds resident who grew up in the area and says he still has many friends in the area. They want to see the site tidied up and ask that the green space contribution is ring fenced to be spent on the nearby Bow Street recreation ground. In response, again, the implementation of development would realise the regeneration of the site, and the intention is that the green space contribution will be directed towards the local recreation ground. It's a requirement of the local plan policy. So in summary, the proposed revised approach is supported by officers, subject to the conditions and the Section 106 obligations set out in the report. It's also considered that following the design workshop, the changes represent a positive improvement on the scheme and do address members' concerns regarding architecture, electric vehicle charging points, the appearance of the car park and affordable housing provision in the context of the viability case. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Daljit, for that very thorough and clearly understood presentation. I see Councillor McKenna has rejoined us. Now that we've had the presentation, would you like to take the chair again, Councillor McKenna?
Thank you, Caroline, for standing in while I dealt with that small emergency. Moving on, can I invite members? There's no speakers, I understand, is that right? I'll invite members to come and ask questions, starting with you, Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, just it's a comment in a sense, but I think this question about the view of St Saviour's is dealt with in the sense that there's a really great tree there that stops anybody seeing anything of St Saviour's. So it might be just a winter problem, but I think that's misleading. The grasscrete, that it does look awful a lot of the time. There's a grasscrete, you know. It is personally, I don't know why people wanted that. Can we not have it tarmacked? I'm sure in the long term, I'm sure it'll be a lot better. And the charging points, a small number, yes, and then more. I didn't quite understand whether the more is on demand or when the developer or whoever's running the site gets round to it. So in other words, if there are more than X number of people with cars that need charging, are they going to have to go somewhere else, some of them, or are they going to have to queue? What? And there have been some changes to the materials. It would have been nice to see those. I know we can't at this late stage, but because they look very interesting.
Thank you. I think the developers are open to how that courtyard area is treated. It was a response to the concerns that members raised last time. The grasscrete is trying to soften the appearance of the car park because the previous concern that it was too harsh. So, you know, we can take members' views on this if there are further comments. In terms of the electric vehicle charging points, my understanding is that as part of the travel plan, there will be ongoing monitoring of demand and effectiveness of trying to reduce reliance on the private car, as it were. And as part of that monitoring review, there'll be a consideration of whether we need to improve the number of electric vehicle charging points. But the site will be future-proofed in that can be asked for and delivered without substantial cost. So it's to be reviewed as part of the regular monitoring of the travel plan. And in terms of materials, yes, I take your point. But there'll be a condition.
We might be having some.
All right, okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, the message didn't come through to me, but that's really welcome. So, I mean, I don't know if members want to take a minute and just have a look.
I think so, yes, members. Okay, can we come back to order, please? Okay, thank you for that. Can I thank the developers for producing those material? Very interesting. I think they were well received by members, apart from one colour. They may have commented, I don't know. Moving on then, can I bring in Councillor Carlisle at this stage?
Thanks, Chair. Just on the previous comment, I prefer the grasscrete myself, rather than concreting over all the green space that we've got there. If we can't have any green space, we may as well green the hard space if we can. I'm just looking at a couple of buildings and looking at the CGIs there. The site at the minute, it's not necessarily tidy, but it does provide some relief as you walk along East Street. It is at least greenery and different from the rest of the buildings. We've got the active frontage on one of the buildings, which I think is welcome down there to provide some activity, but then the rounded building, so I'm looking at slide 23, the rounded building further along, we haven't got any activity there, nor have we got necessarily any greenery around there. I wondered if any discussions had been had around either there being any possibility of an active frontage to that building, or whether we've looked in the concept of something such as a green wall or something to green it up, or at least some difference, because I think you'll come past what is an active building to then quite a dull brick side as you work your way along.
If I can remind members, we have the applicants here, so we could bring one on to answer that question directly. But start with Belgium, please.
I think it's been a long journey and a difficult journey, and the context of all our discussions has been the art of the possible in the context of the viability. So I think clearly, if we were to make the building smaller, you lose accommodation. You're constrained by East Street and Bow Street down the back. And we took the view, probably early doors, which members challenged, that part of the character of East Street was buildings on the back edge of the pavement, the old mill buildings with very little buffer or defensible space. But I think I take your point about greening the walls. Now, if there's an opportunity to do that, I'm happy if Chair allows it for the architect to respond to that point. But I think actually reducing the amount of accommodation would be an issue.
Can I invite the architect to come forward, please? Please sit down. Well, without further ado, please, you have heard a question, so maybe you could address it at this stage, please.
Oh, there we go, wrong one. I can agree that on block C, the concentration of active frontage is more visible, but we have positioned the entranceway onto block A to be facing East Street, so you will have a glimmer of looking into the building as you walk down there. So there will be some activity into the lobby spaces within block A along East Street there, so it won't be a completely dull facade by any means.
Dalcha did suggest that there might be more greening of it, a green wall or something if appropriate. Perhaps that's something to consider.
I think again we've tried to introduce planters within the whole of with the whole of East Street, and we've left a larger recess of 2 brick courses along there. So there is the possibility to introduce planters. A green wall is potentially something we could look at, but it's not necessarily in keeping with the design proposals as we're currently showing them. Would you say, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we can clearly look at, but we have made some moves, as Philippa said, to try and get some greenery going along on that frontage. So yeah, we can take that away and certainly see if it's something that could be incorporated.
It's just to come back to this grasscrete. I've maintained a lot of grasscrete in my time, and it will become mudcrete because it's not designed for permanent car parking. It's designed as grasscrete for occasional use, which is the window cleaner and the fire engine, hopefully never to run on it. And if you don't think of something else, you'll just end up with mud, and then you end up with mud on your nice tarmac, and that'll trail in on your shoes wherever you go, Dalgit, I have to say. So my personal view is there's loads of stuff out there that is permeable block paving that could be used as it inserts and used for the lines and that sort of thing. I'm sure there is some expert here at that end. I'm not sure whether it's Stephen that can tell us what we could use rather than grasscrete to soften it.
Do you have a comment on that comment, please?
It was discussed in detail when we were proposing what we could do with the courtyard, and I think the consensus was we were trying to green the space up as much as possible, hence the grasscrete. There are obviously alternative materials that you could look to put there instead of the grasscrete that would be less problems with maintenance. It's something, again, we can look at, I suppose.
I just come back to my point is if you put grass down, people will run on it, and when they run on it every night in October, November, December and January, they muddy it up and it just destroys it completely. And then, you know, the pollutants get dropped, you know, on it, and it dies off, and it's just a non-starter for permanent use. It's designed as the manufacturer designs it as a temporary use. It's so that you can run heavy vehicles on occasional use. That is the word that they use, occasional use. A car park is not occasional use.
Is that something we could look into further, Bob? Dalgit, please.
Yes, we can. We have conditions on there to control the surfacing details, surfacing treatment, and we can, as I said, depending on how panel guides us, we can look at the details of that later on.
I have to say that grasscrete did appeal to me, but I've heard a technical explanation of the problem. So obviously, the greener the better normally, isn't it? So that we can park for the moment and come back on it and look at alternative park. That's a good one, isn't it? Okay, moving on then. Councillor Blackburn, please.
We haven't parked it for a minute because I'm going to mention it. From memory, there's at least two kinds of grasscrete you can have. One which is concrete, and one which is like a sort of plastic stuff that actually I've got put in front of a couple of blocks of flats in my ward that seems to work okay. What kind of surfacing were you proposing? Were you proposing actual concrete or the plasticized?
At the moment, I don't think the details being fully worked through about exactly what we are proposing. So it's something that we can look at, obviously, with the officers to get a solution that everyone's happy with.
Well, just going back, I mean, I've got to say, I can understand where Paul's coming from. That if you're not careful, cars run over where the protective coating is, or the concrete is, and go onto the grass, and then it does get muddy there. But my experience is as I say, I've got a couple of blocks of flats where we've used it in our ward, where it's worked okay. And I know one place where, and this is temporary parking, where a grass areas are used for parking on market days 3 or 4 times a week, where it works wonderfully. So as I said, that's just my view.
Thank you, David. It's something we can further consider. Neil, please. Councillor Walshaw.
Thank you, Chair. There'll be no dad jokes from me, don't worry. We are an extremely detailed and some might say even wordy panel. We've gone over this in quite some detail, Chair. The developers moved quite a long way. It's certainly, I think, actually quite a good development now. A few details like the ones Councillor Carlo's raised, I would share, and a bit more greenery is always a good thing. But at an appropriate juncture, Chair, I'm satisfied. I'd be happy to move the recommendations. So.
No, we're not on to comments, but I'll park that one. Another sad joke, I'm afraid, Neil. Caroline, you wanted a question, please?
Thank you, Chair. It was just clarification of the electric vehicle charging points. You did cover this, Daljit, in the presentation, but I'm still not 100% clear. So originally there were 31 charging points provided. The policy compliant position would be 124. So we're staying with the 31 fully equipped at completion of the development. And then there will be further infrastructure to enable 72. And then substation capacity will allow for 103. I don't understand the relationship between the 72 and the 103.
So it's an additional 72 to the 31. So 31 are there on completion of development. And then because the substation capacity is being increased as part of the development, there's an opportunity to provide a further 71 spaces. So overall, there'll be 103.
I understand that now. So who would fund that future provision, and how would it happen?
The developer would fund that. There's a travel plan that's been committed to, along with a travel plan fund, and it will be monitored by the travel plan coordinator and our own TravelWise team, so that we can bring those spaces online as demand and need is recognised. That's my understanding.
And that will be fully monitored by?
Yes, the travel plan is monitored annually.
It's okay, Caroline. Thank you. I think that concludes questions, comments. Neil has already started off. So anybody else wants to make a comment? Graham, please.
Just to say that I think that the developer has gone a long way to in fact, has met virtually most of our concerns from last time. And I really don't want to see too much different about this. This suggestion about green walls, I know, you know, we've got to think about these things, but not on the front of a building like that block. I mean, this is a facade made up predominantly of windows. Where you're going to grow green there, I don't really know. I mean, if you wanted to look like a 17th century manor house or something like that with the ivy growing up it, fine, you know, but it's going to be very difficult to achieve without blocking somebody's windows. So no, I think they've done a good job, and I think that they've met most of the concerns, and I would be happy to support it.
Thank you, Chair. Likewise, happy to support and indeed happy to second. With the caveat that I do hope that Councillor Wadsworth's comments are taken on board. We're lucky on this panel that we have a number of, I consider them to be experts, where Councillor Nash in terms of trees, but we've got a landscape gardener, landscape architect, and when they give words of caution, I think we would be foolhardy not to hope that they would be given their due weight.
Thank you, Dan. Points well made by Paul. We wanted to be right, not just for a few months, but for the duration of the scheme. Caroline, please.
Well, I'd just also like to say that I think considerable progress has been made, and I would also be happy to support the proposal on the table. I particularly welcome the choice of materials that have been put before us today. I think they're very suitable. I would just make one comment, and perhaps it's a comment about how we show materials. Quite often the materials that are used look very different when you're looking at the building from a distance once it's been constructed. And of course, we've looked at that at a level of detail. So perhaps in future times we need to find a way of being able to appreciate what the distanced view of materials will look like. But nevertheless, I welcome what's been chosen, and I think we are ready now to approve this application.
Thank you, Caroline. Al, please.
Yes, I too like this application. I think it's quality development, which I'm happy to support. I like the bricks, especially the Farmstead Antique and the Carsington Cream, and I think they'll all go well together. And I welcome the electric vehicle points and the plans to have more if demand comes, which I think it will, because East Street is a fairly hideous road to live near at the moment. So I'm glad there's some protection from it. But as time goes on and there's more electric vehicles, at least the noise and the pollution will lessen, even if the volume of vehicles doesn't. And I believe there's going to be the crossing, which will be good as well. So generally, yes, happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Garthwaite. Neil has moved the recommendation. Is there a seconder for that? Kaylee, I've seen. Okay. So all those in favour of the recommendation, please show. I'm glad to say that's unanimous. Would you like to sum up for us, Daljit, please?
Thank you, Chair. Overall, members are supportive of the positive response that the applicant has made to the original concerns that panel raised. There's been some discussion about the use of grasscrete and the appropriateness and practicality of that. And I think I'm right in thinking that although some members would like to see the grasscrete, it's not at the risk of this not working functionally, and it needs to work functionally. So I'm happy for that to be taken away and discussed in detail by officers under delegated powers to make sure that whatever is provided, not only does it soften it, but it also works in practice. Subject to that, the members have decided to support the application and approve the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Daljit. Can we move on then to agenda item 9 on page 103? Zabby?
Yeah, Abby's just
Good afternoon, Abby. Please present the report when you're ready.
Thanks very much, Chair. Can you hear me okay? Great. So following on from the last panel meeting where I came and gave an introduction to the work that we're doing in Temple District, which is ultimately the preparation of a new planning brief for the area, which will guide and steer future redevelopment proposals within the area. This time around, I'm going to give you a little bit more of a detailed overview of the content of the planning brief and update you where we are in terms of the consultation that's taking place at the moment on it. So if we could go to the next slide, please. And the next one after that, please. So just to remind members from last time, in terms of our ambition for Temple District, it is what's on screen. So it's the creation of a vibrant and distinctive mixed use neighbourhood, which acts as an exemplar for sustainable development, enhances the setting and secures the future of a significant listed building, and delivers on a long-standing ambition for large-scale regeneration as a focal point for Leeds South Bank. Next slide, please. Just go to the next slide, please, sorry. I don't think these are the right slides. They're not the ones I put in the file. Pardon? So sorry about this. They're in this. It doesn't matter. Just put those ones back up. It's fine.
We all have a pack that we can go through if it's
Has
saves time.
it got these ones in, or has it got a different setting?
Yeah, we have, yeah.
Has it? Something's gone wrong somewhere. It's fine. It's not a problem. If you could just go to the next one, please, if that's okay.
Yep.
That one will do it. Thanks very much. Just in terms of the strategic principles, these kind of set out the overall aspiration for the brief and help to provide that strategic context in terms of design, placemaking, uses, housing mix and affordability, employment, and scale and massing. If you just go to the next one, please. Thanks very much. As well as conservation, connectivity, public realm, sustainability and climate emergency priorities, as well as flood risk. And as I said, these set the context for the brief overall. And then what the brief does is goes into these principles in a bit more detail. If we just go into the next slide. Thanks very much. So in terms of the climate ready and nature friendly approach, which we discussed at panel last time, I'm just going to go into that in a little bit more detail. What we mean by that is in practical terms, it means that the council expects a strategic approach to development in the district, which coordinates and co-locates the delivery of infrastructure in the area to address key policy requirements and to enhance placemaking within the district in the context of infrastructure schemes and other future public investment opportunities. In terms of what's captured as part of that climate ready and nature friendly approach to placemaking, it's key considerations of green space, public realm and open space, biodiversity, drainage, flood risk, sustainable design, connectivity and permeability and connectivity to local communities. There's clearly quite a lot of crossover between all of those key themes within the brief, and it's kind of why we're advocating for a strategic and comprehensive approach to development, which captures all of that into a wider whole to make sure that these considerations are integrated well together. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thanks very much. So multiple areas of high quality public open space at a variety of scales will be needed within the Temple district to enable connectivity and deliver a legible public realm for the district, which enhances the setting of Temple works. These spaces should be delivered as part of the overall strategy and delivered using a phased approach. Spaces should signpost and facilitate through movement within Temple district and to the wider South Bank area, but also act as attractive functional, green and usable spaces for a range of uses and build on the area's heritage. Active frontages to ground floors are encouraged and to bring life and activity to the area and to complement the public spaces. They should be accessible to all, not just to residents of new development or occupiers of new development, and provide space for socialising, rest, play, as well as having the ability to support public art and events. In line with the Leeds Our Spaces strategy. Tree planting and greening will need to be a key priority for streets, public realm and open spaces to help soften the appearance of these areas and to provide sheltered space. A continuous palette of materials for lighting and street furniture will be used or should be used throughout to help unify and provide identity, and spaces should be suitably designed to be climate ready and have the ability to mitigate against poor weather and help to ensure a quality urban environment. Open space should also or is encouraged to make use of water assets in the area, being the Holbeck and the Leeds Liverpool Canal. Just go to the next slide, please. This slide highlights some opportunities for open spaces within the Temple district and provides, and the brief provides guidance on the types of spaces to be delivered. Now, at this point, these are indicative, but as I said, highlight the opportunities for what could be delivered, the details of which will come through ultimately through future planning applications. But there's quite clearly a range of opportunities within the district to provide that open space. If we go to the next slide, please. The areas covered by several policy initiatives that encourage the enhancement of green and blue infrastructure, as well as encouraging biodiversity improvements. And these provide opportunities for development to integrate green and blue infrastructure as part of the overall scheme, which can contribute to the climate ready and nature friendly approach that we're advocating for, as well as simultaneously reflecting the historic character of the area. There's an expectation that green and blue infrastructure combined with mobility infrastructure for pedestrians and cyclists will be used to effectively stitch Temple district together, both within the district, but also critically to areas outside of the district boundary, to surrounding communities and to the wider city centre. This will deliver an enhanced environment for pedestrians and cyclists alongside environmental benefits, as I've said. Next slide, please. Again, this map identifies some green and blue infrastructure opportunities at Temple District, which would ultimately serve to link spaces together within the district. A key corridor is the Sweet Street and Marshall Street corridors, identified in existing policies as a green corridor opportunity, which could provide connectivity potential both north, south and east, west. There's a central corridor along Bath Road, which could provide, again, north-south as well as east-west connections, as it connects or would serve to connect a public right-of-way route that essentially runs from Holbeck right into the heart of the district and beyond. There's the Holbeck Viaduct, which has been a long-standing aspiration to open up as a greenway, and we're encouraging development to make provision for that and make opportunities for providing access to that, should that project go ahead. And then on Globe Road, Water Lane, the existing planning consent for that scheme identifies green corridors, landscaped public realm linkages through the site. Next slide, please. For biodiversity, core strategy policy G9 identifies the Leeds habitat network, and part of this is located in Temple District, key pockets being located along Sweet Street, Bath Road and the viaduct. Development within Temple District will be expected in line with policy to provide a minimum 10% net gain for biodiversity. And the brief identifies some priorities and opportunities for improving biodiversity in the district, including planting and greening, sustainable design, green walls in particular, and green roofs. A focus on green corridors, as I've already mentioned, ensuring that the area is pedestrian friendly, as well as a focus on water and SUDS opportunities, which would also have a biodiversity benefit. Next slide, please. For drainage and flood risk, parts of the Temple District are located in flood zones 2 and 3, and it'd be crucial to ensure that a viable strategy for drainage and flood risk is in place. Having a suitable strategy will also enable sustainable and resilient development, whilst also providing sort of wider benefits for the area in terms of green infrastructure as well. The brief therefore advocates for an integrated approach to drainage and SUDS through the provision of an overarching SUDS strategy for the area, which will help to make them a key feature within the district rather than a purely functional engineering feature. Careful management of surface water drainage is also required, as well as the need to address dealing with foul drainage. Next slide, please. The brief recognises the importance of sustainable design and existing core strategy requirements in terms of policies EN1, EN2 and EN4 to address energy, BREEAM standards for commercial developments, water efficiency and potential district heating, whilst also acknowledging that the council is advancing the local plan update, which seeks to update existing and introduce new planning policies to address the climate emergency. The historic fabric of Temple District presents opportunities for development to reuse and repurpose materials as part of new development, and there's an expectation that where feasible this will be done. However, where buildings are of significance, new developments will be expected to work with existing buildings. It is acknowledged that some demolition is likely to take place in order to prepare sites for larger floor plates or design which are probably more appropriate for modern requirements. And next slide, please. Lack of connectivity within the Temple District is considered to be a current constraint, and members who were on the site visit this morning will have seen that, with many links providing limited legibility, low perceptions of safety, poor infrastructure for walking and cycling, and not contributing positively to the overall environment. Many links that are there could be improved to provide better connectivity within Temple District, connecting that area to the city centre or to the wider city centre, as well as providing connectivity to residential communities to the south, which will help to provide precedent and catalyst for improvements outside of Temple District within the wider area. There's an aspiration within existing policy to ensure that the area is permeable and accessible for walking and cycling. This prevents a further opportunity for the integration of infrastructure within a high quality public realm to create connections within the area. The brief identifies a number of priorities, again, for connectivity, such as the creation of safe, accessible and legible networks joined up with interchanges between different transport modes and the pedestrian core, prioritising an active travel with links to local communities being particularly important, reducing through traffic, acknowledging the impact of ongoing city centre transport improvement schemes, and trying to minimise the adverse effects on the wider area, traffic calming and speed reduction, connectivity, legibility and permeability, and creating sort of navigation to and from the wider city centre as well as to communities in the south. Opportunities to restore the historic grain which was lost during the demolition that took place in the 1950s in particular, addressing severance issues to the south, connections as well as connections to transport hubs and to future HS2 potential as well. Just go on to the next slide, please. The brief then highlights the key connections within the area, in particular to surrounding communities. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on all of that, but just picking up on a concern about parking from last time. We're encouraging, as part of the brief, for a future master plan for Temple District to set out a parking strategy for the whole of the area, which aligns to anticipated phasing of development. And this will take into account the aspirations within the Connecting Leeds transport strategy, where Leeds should be a city where you don't need to own a car, but also maximising the highly sustainable location of the area in relation to the rest of the city centre, and to the wider South Bank, in order to minimise the use of cars as far as possible, whilst also fulfilling the needs of development and minimising potential spillover effects into surrounding communities. Car clubs and the use of nearby park and ride facilities are encouraged. The overall parking strategy will need to include solutions for individual sites which support their anticipated use in line with policy and ensure user safety, as well as the delivery of a long-term solution, which could include or might include a multi-storey car park in the area, if that's considered necessary, acknowledging that the concentration of parking into one site would help to allow the rest of the area to be better for pedestrians and cyclists. Next slide, please. A key part of the brief is the idea of connectivity to local communities, and we consider that to be not just physical connectivity but also social connectivity, as well as delivering that physical connectivity. Development will be expected to deliver that wider social connectivity as it's developed. This will be delivered in a number of ways through both the construction phase but also post occupancy as well. Developments and their occupiers are encouraged and expected to link up with the aspirations for jobs and skills creation within South Leeds in particular, through providing apprenticeship and training opportunities, local employment initiatives in partnership with the council as part of the economic recovery aspirations post-COVID. The development of the area will lead to the creation of a new neighbourhood, and ultimately it's really important that this new neighbourhood is connected to existing residential communities to ensure, or by ensuring that the area is permeable and welcoming, and by minimising any sense that it's exclusive or an enclave. That's really important. In addition, as well as that, encouragement will also be given to initiatives that seek to build connections between Temple District and potential cultural institutions that are going to be there, as well with local residential communities. Next slide, please. In terms of uses and ground conditions, the brief recognises that the majority of the area is either allocated in the site allocations plan or is an identified site. There's an expectation already in place within policy that there will be a mix of uses, including housing, employment and offices. The brief sets out an indicative assessment of capacity of the sites, but that's only indicative based on the allocations in the site allocations plan. Overall, the employment and office uses are to be compatible with the vision for the area as a whole, and the brief gives encouragement to small scale startup opportunities, creative and digital businesses, research and development, shared workspaces and offices alongside larger floor plate offices. Housing is to be delivered in line with core strategy expectations on mix, affordable housing, accessible housing requirements and space standards requirements, as well as the brief supporting sort of cultural, educational and leisure opportunities in line with the existing SPD expectations. There's also a need to consider supporting facilities, services and other social infrastructure that's required as part of supporting a sustainable new neighbourhood. And then in terms of land contamination, there's quite a lot of on-site issues there, and obviously development will be expected to address that and overcome that. Next slide, please. The overriding objective, as members will know, is for the proposed regeneration of Temple Works, finding a sustainable long-term future for that building in an enhanced setting. Development within Temple District will be required to demonstrate then how the existing historic character will be woven into new development through the use of materials, sense of place, retention of routes, key views, and the opening up of temple works. Development proposals will be required to demonstrate a full understanding of historic assets affected, including temple works, but also the wider Holbeck conservation area. There's quite a significant amount of policy in place already through the UDP and through the core strategy, as well as the Holbeck conservation area designation, and therefore the brief just signposts at this point to existing policy, with opportunities highlighted to enhance the historic character of the area, reinforcing opportunities for heritage-led regeneration in line with existing policy principles. Next slide, please. Alongside design, scale and massing within the area is obviously a really key consideration to provide an appropriate setting for the historic environment within Temple District, as well as delivering a sufficient scale of development to capture potential cross-subsidy benefits for ultimately the repair and reuse of temple works, and to provide a deliverable scheme overall. The draft tall buildings SPD identifies part of the area adjacent to the viaduct and north of Water Lane as a preferred area for tall buildings. In addition, extant and recent permissions within and surrounding the area have established the principle of tall buildings within parts of the area. However, obviously these tall buildings must be sensitively balanced against the need to provide an appropriate context for the historic environment. There's an opportunity to use new tall buildings as a signpost or a marker to enable wayfinding and navigation. Temple Works itself has historically been surrounded by buildings that are taller than it, and has a sense of being hunkered down and hidden from view. So there's an opportunity to provide a central enclosure with surrounding buildings, whilst also providing an enhanced setting and opening up views of the frontage opposite along Marshall Street. Sorry. Next slide, please. To help clarify expectations or guidance for tall buildings, we've divided the area up into four zones, setting out indicative recommendations for scale and massing. The north zone includes sites north of Water Lane, identified within the brief as an appropriate area for tall buildings. The middle zone, which includes sites along Bath Road, identified as an area where it's more appropriate for more mid-rise buildings to ensure a positive relationship with the historic environment and the viaduct. The south area, which includes sites to the north of Sweet Street West, there's an opportunity for tall buildings here within the area. There is a need to ensure obviously a positive relationship with Temple Works, and then the east zone with sites adjacent to Marshall Street and Leodis Court. Here it's going to be most critical to ensure that relationship with Temple Works, though a step up away from the building could be justified towards the eastern extents of the district. The brief also highlights important considerations like wind and microclimate, as well as the new building safety initiative. Next slide, please. Design and character. The brief again signposts to existing character analysis and guidance within existing SPDs. In order to provide a distinctive identity for Temple District, the use of street furniture design will all be brought into that in order to create a distinctive new neighbourhood, as well as enhancing the opportunities for accessibility. Materials, it'll obviously be important for any new materials to take cues from the historic environment and provide that high quality design that I know the council's seeking to achieve. As well as the importance of retaining this important historic character. In terms of views, these are set out in the Holbeck South Bank SPD, and the brief encourages those to be retained. Development will also be expected to provide new views through the area, including through public spaces, to create that sense of place, using buildings as an opportunity to frame or create new views as well. Next slide, please. In terms of delivery of the brief overall, the council, as part of encouraging a comprehensive approach to development within Temple District, we would support a master plan led development that takes account of and responds to the planning brief as we've set out. Master planning will also help to ensure that the development achieves that climate ready and nature friendly approach that we're advocating for. Community engagement and consultation obviously will form a really important part of that master planning work, consistent with national policy and guidance on good design. Future master planning will also need to set out a phased approach to development as well as infrastructure delivery in order to ensure that the scheme is ultimately policy compliant. And part of the purpose of the brief is to establish the overall all spatial vision and guidance for Temple. Future planning applications will be expected to respond to that and the principles that have been set out in the brief. The brief obviously therefore supports a constructive pre-application engagement with the council. Just next slide, please. And then just finally, in terms of the appendices in the brief, to ensure a successful relationship with Temple District and the surrounding areas, sites outside of the red line boundary for the brief are encouraged to use the brief to inform proposals. Consideration should be given in particular to sort of connectivity, the aspirations that are set out in the brief, as well as other planning guidance documents. Sites outside the boundary should have regard to key routes as have been identified, as well as opportunities to create green and blue infrastructure connectivity as well. And then for Sweet Street South, which is the site that we showed last time on the screen, obviously that's a really, really important site in terms of bringing forward and achieving the vision for Temple District overall. It'll be really critical to ensure that there's a positive relationship ultimately between that site and the rest of the Temple District. There's also quite a big number of important policy considerations within the Holbeck Neighbourhood Plan, which complement and contribute to the vision for Temple District overall, and will apply to development proposals on that site as the site falls within the Holbeck Neighbourhood Plan area. So principles for the site are set out in an appendix, which are aligned to existing planning policy guidance documents. But key ones for that site are ensuring that appropriate relationship as I've set out, appropriate heights and scale, a mix of uses, that connectivity both in green infrastructure terms, but also in highways terms, sustainable urban drainage, active frontages, open spaces, and then also recognising the importance of the commercial in public house, which sits right on the corner of that site. So apologies for quite a detailed skip through the brief there. There's quite a lot in it and it's quite complex, so I needed to take the time to take you through that, but I'll leave it there, Chair, and welcome any questions or comments from members.
Thank you for taking us through that. It's an excellent brief, by the way, and don't apologise, we're happy to go through it. It's a very important scheme for the city. It will take some time to realise, but hopefully this is the start. I particularly like the expression heritage-led regeneration. I think we should keep that in the forefront of our mind. It's a brilliant phase, and in that area, a very important one. But thank you for that, Abby. And I'll open it to members for questions. Graham, please.
It's handy sitting next to you, isn't it? Yes, thank you very much indeed. That was incredibly detailed, but I'm probably a bit slow, but one thing I don't understand about this is, are we, I mean, I know what we're trying to do here, but it's the end product, as you might say. Are we happy for it to develop as it develops, so to speak, and that the people who come forward wanting to establish a business, establish manufacturing, whatever it might be, or to live there, or at least to build residential accommodation? Or have we got behind the plan a plan of what we want it to look like in the end? Am I making myself clear? You know, what if it turned out sort of 8 to 2 residential, or 3 to 7 manufacturing? Does that matter in the big plan?
Well, there's the expectations are set out in the site allocations plan for in terms of the proportions of uses that you're going to get, but at the moment those are indicative, and as a sort of a minimum, we do expect and as part of a mixed use scheme that it will be a mix of uses overall, but the details of that will be resolved through planning applications. But there is a sort of capacity exercise set out in the brief over what that could look like, but the details will come through as part of planning applications. There's an employment element to the bigger allocation in that area, and that's the expectation that the council's got. In terms of how that come forwards, that'll be for applications to resolve. Does that answer your question? Is that sufficient?
Yes, I suppose it does, really, in the sense that there is a big picture, but it could vary in the delivery, perhaps. Am I right there?
That's right.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of an unknown about it. Okay. Yeah, no, thank you.
Peter, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think my points are more maybe on the document rather than the presentation, because I spent some time going through that. And I think I got last time, so thanks for coming again to put some more meat on the bones, but I think I got last time an idea of certainly what kind of applications I'd like to see come through from this area. And I think that is in line with the applications the council would like to see come through. I've been going through some of the points though, and I'm just a bit concerned in the document itself. It maybe doesn't have the teeth to ensure that the applications that come through in that area are the ones that we are hoping for. So, I mean, I'll focus, I guess, on the transport points on it, because they're the ones I'm probably more familiar with, and colleagues may then pick up the others. But the couple of bits I've highlighted are sort of, you know, proposals should introduce landscaping and planting, enhancement of existing pedestrian routes, take steps to reduce the prominence of through traffic calming will be expected. Well, a lot of that is our standard policy and has been for some time. So I'm finding it hard to see how this is much different than just the council policy. And I'm hoping that in this area we take the opportunity to look at what it is, look at what it would have been maybe, you know, 70, 100 years ago, where there wasn't all that through traffic going through, where people were wandering to work, where people were using everything, where we enhance those buildings and take away the fact that maybe they're right up to the road. And I'm finding it difficult to think, if an application came in, how can we make sure an application in this area has the teeth in the background to be, you know, a better application than we might be able to accept in another area, if you understand me.
Thanks for that. It's a really important point. It's probably worth clarifying that it's not the role of the brief to introduce any new policy. So the policies that we've got in the development plan are our policies, and that's the starting point for any future planning application. What the brief seeks to do is because there's quite a lot of overlapping policies for the areas, to clarify what all of that means and make sense of it, as well as bring it together in one consolidated place. So the starting points for any of the schemes that ultimately come in as a planning application will be the policies in the development plan, as well as the guidance in the brief in terms of bringing all of that together into one sensible place. But I wouldn't want to give the impression that we're watering down any policies in any way, because members will need to consider the policies that apply to the scheme, as well as other material considerations for them at that point in time. But in terms of the role of the brief, it's to provide that stepping stone to future master planning work and to a future pre-application proposal from a developer. So I suppose it's to provide that midway point in terms of bringing all of those policies and important considerations together, but certainly not to water down any of the policies that we've got.
Thanks for that. That does explain in a way. I mean, I guess my hope and aspiration for this area, and I'm sure many members is that we get something really good in this area that is a huge coherent area, and I think that's what we're seeing. If then we're sticking with a sort of very open expectation of those policies and maybe not putting the detail in as the council, then I think we could be open to a number of developers coming with a number of different schemes and then not really having that master plan there to adapt and change them to give a really coherent neighborhood, and a different neighborhood maybe feel than some of the others. So I'm just a bit concerned in that way. I know then we go into some of the detail around maybe some of the routes, what we expect some of the roads to be, but we're not necessarily using language such as, you know, we expect there to be reallocation of this road space or anything in there. We haven't gone as far as that yet. Is that a step that's going to come? Otherwise, I'm a bit worried that we're leaving ourselves open to that plan. As Graham was saying, really, this plan could develop over time, and we're leaving it open to develop into something that probably isn't what the council is hoping for.
Thanks, that's worthwhile. Yes, yeah, a helpful clarification in terms of the question that you're asking. I think members should be reassured by the fact that the council's encouraging a comprehensive scheme overall, and that's for the whole of the area, and that will be informed by future master planning work, and that's to be expected over coming months and years, and that will set out all of that in detail. In terms of tightening up that wording, we can go away and look at that in the next version of it to make sure that we're not giving the impression that there's any loosening of any policies, and making sure that we really are setting out our stall in terms of the type of quality that we will be expecting. Would that satisfy your point?
I'll bring David in, please. I think he wants a word.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to add to Abby's comments in response to Councillor Cahill's comments, if I may. I think the brief is seeking to amplify and stitch together the policy framework that we have, because I think, as Abby has outlined, that there is a comprehensive coverage of policy within this part of Leeds in particular. And I think what the brief is trying to do is to translate those principles to the geography of this part of Leeds in a very practical way. I think in terms of sort of the next steps, we will need to reflect on the consultation comments that come in to see how, you know, we can gauge the responses there and what the reaction is to the many principles and ideas set out in the brief. And then following on from that, there'll be a further iteration of the brief to update it. And then moving into sort of the master planning stage, that would enable us then to translate those principles in the brief to the practicalities of applications coming through. I think the question you're driving at really is about the level of prescription, isn't it? And I think that issue of prescription will come out of that next iteration in terms of looking at the comments that come in and then framing the brief in terms of translating it into a master planning exercise. So yes, we are trying to raise standards. We are trying to amplify the policy principles that we've got. But I think as people are saying, we need to look at it as a comprehensive whole to make sure it works collectively.
Thank you, David. Kaylee, please.
Thanks, Chair. I have similar sort of comment really, because housing mix and affordability was included, but there's not anything by way of meat on the bones detail, like is it social housing or would it just be policy for affordables? Like is there anything in the pipeline that would mean that there's property or development with social rent coming out at the end of it? Because you made a comment about the area not being exclusive, but certainly one of the best ways to minimize exclusivity is to include some properly affordable rental properties in there, just to open up the inclusivity. Because obviously if you've got a site of this sort of size so close to the city centre, the danger is that local people are going to be priced out of being able to live there if they want to. So yeah, I just wanted to know what your thoughts were about that.
I think it's a really, really important point. The starting point will always be the policy, but the policy's got an affordable housing on site first precedent in it. It's like I said before, it's not really the role of the brief to set out that level of detail at this stage. That will come forward as part of the master planning work, but our contention is through the brief that affordable housing will be delivered on site in accordance with the policy requirements, and that will come through the housing mix of a scheme when it comes to pre-app and planning application stage. At the moment, it's not the role of the brief to resolve all of those detailed issues. It's just set out this is an important consideration. Future applications will need to take this into account. That's kind of what it's seeking to achieve.
Sorry, just to come back, Chair. So the affordables level would be 7% in this location, wouldn't it? So an on-site provision would really not be that much. So I do have concerns. I would like to see the council sort of, it's obviously not your responsibility as a planner, but I would like to see the council commit to funding some kind of housing association properties or something like that alongside, like to complement that on-site provision, I think.
as you say, it's not really my responsibility to commit to that. So, but I understand the point that you're making, and I can take that away if that's all right. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. It is on this theme, I'm afraid. I suppose my question is, how binding is the master plan, pardon me, ultimately intended to be? Because certainly in this panel, we have had developers come to us in relation to things that are guidance and say that, well, the guidance, but your policy says this, and our proposal is policy compliant. Now, it may not be master plan compliant, but it may well be policy compliant. And therefore, my question is, are we looking ultimately, and I've been through this document a number of times, I accept it's part of a journey, but is the ultimate end that this is going to create a policy that is enforceable within this area? Or are we saying what as a council we would like to see? And if it is the latter, and I become a developer who really doesn't care what you tell me you want to see, but bring something to fruit that is entirely policy compliant, can I politely tell you where to shove your master plan? Because actually, if it is that, we've wasted about an hour.
Thanks for that. That's a really important point. Once the brief's approved, it'll be a material consideration in the determination of planning applications. Now, it'll be up to panel as the likely decision maker on those applications to give the brief the weight that you feel it needs. The brief is grounded in existing planning policy, like I've said already. It doesn't create any new policy. It consolidates the policy that we've already got and clarifies that to the area and what that means to the area. So it will have the backing of being grounded in the development plan policies that we've already got in place. So it will be up for to the decision maker at that point in time the weight to give to the planning brief. As part of a master planning approach, it could be that the master plan is approved as part of a planning application. Again, that will be up for the decision maker at that point in time to take a view on.
So to all intents and purposes, as a panel, we would give this the same weight as we would a neighbourhood plan. Would that be an accurate analogy, or am I seeking to draw a parallel that doesn't really exist?
I can answer that if you want, David. I'm going to go ahead,
Sorry, I was just going to say, I mean, in terms of, I think that what we're talking about is weight, isn't it, to be attached to this? Neighbourhood plans form part of the development plan, so they have weight as being part of the development plan. The brief has weight as guidance, so it has different weight from something that forms part of the development plan. So it has weight as guidance. I don't know if Pippa wanted to come in as well, but that's my understanding, Chair.
David covered my points totally. Thanks.
Thank you. It's been a long-term aspiration of mine to have a walking route through this area. And I'm very pleased to hear that the whole brief is going to be heritage-led, because there are many, many people who don't even know about Temple Works or Marshall's Mill, and it is a very historic area. I would really like that. My aspiration has been for a walking route. I'm sorry, this is a little bit of a preamble to my question. But when I was without a car for a few weeks, I had to catch a bus into my own ward, which I caught in Neville Street under the rail bridge. And I was amazed that the bus virtually emptied on Hunslet Hall Road, where it joins Beeston Road. And in a way, I didn't blame those passengers, because if they'd walked the route of the bus route, it's the most appalling busy road network. And my aspiration would have been for a walking route from the bottom of Beeston Road. If you look at the map on page 59, Hunslet Hall Road is just south of the bottom border, and you can see a road which is truncated that by the motorway. That was Beeston Road, which was a main road into the city centre with trams. It's residential now, but it's a huge wide street. But there is a pedestrian footway underneath the motorway. And could I ask that you seriously look at having a route, a walking route from the motorway underpass into the city centre, and erect now walking signposts so that it's recognised that this is a route which encourages people to use now, so that when there is any development, this is well looked after.
Thanks, Councillor Nash. There is it's also a Holbeck history trail which comes. It could start off in this area and spread down into sort of the old industrial bits of Holbeck proper, if you might want to call it. That's an opportunity to set that out in a bit more detail. I think members will have seen on the site visit this morning that the area is not particularly friendly or welcoming to pedestrians at the moment, and that's a really key priority within the brief. Now the route you mentioned on Beeston Road is a bit far away from the south extent of the brief, but does provide that continuity. So it might be that there's an opportunity to point that out and express that in some way in the brief to get that proper continuity from Beeston up into this part of South Bank, and we can have a look at that in the next iteration of it.
Right, thank you. That sounds satisfactory. By the way, I didn't go on the brief the visit this morning because I've walked this area many times.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, like Councillor Nash, I've visited this site on many occasions. It is unfortunate. I would have liked to have visited again were it not for specific personal circumstances that emerged this morning. But I am very familiar with it. I think we're kind of addressing a theme collectively. Liz's question was very specific, and I welcome it about the walkway. I wonder if it could be a high walkway like in New York. That would be something quite spectacular, wouldn't it? But my general point is that I think it probably needs saying at this point that I think this is a fantastic concept, really welcomed. And as you said, Chair, the notion that heritage is the hallmark of this development, I welcome. And I think it's great that we've got an overall framework for this part of the city. And I think the design of it will prevent us from having a piecemeal development of this, that and the other, and that everything will be, hopefully, to a high standard. But I do echo what other colleagues have said, in that it sounds to me like this panel has a lot of hard work in front of it, because when each of these developments come along, all this actually amounts to is a piece of guidance, and we will have all the usual harrying and persuading and cajoling and, you know, being fairly insistent in the end that those standards that we're looking for of heritage of the city are adhered to. So like others, I think it's great, but I just think it needs weight and it needs teeth, and we need to be able to feel as a panel that we can use this as a tool to say to the likes of Red Row, sorry, your print book won't work here. We want something specifically designed for this area to the guidance that's set out here. And David, you were talking about weight. You know, I just ask myself, how much weight does this particular piece of guidance have?
Thanks, Councillor Green, and your welcoming comments are really appreciated. In terms of the weight point, it will be up to members in terms of the weight that they would want to give it as part of the determination of an application. I can't say any more than that, unfortunately, in terms of the weight, because it is ultimately going to be supplementary planning guidance. But I would imagine that members will be given confidence by the fact that master planning work is likely to be ongoing, and you're likely to be able to see some of that over the coming months in terms of that master planning work. So as I've said before, the brief essentially paves the way for that more detailed piece of work. And at each point, as we go through this journey, as has been said, there's an opportunity to refine it and make sure that what we're setting out in terms of the high level stuff in the brief is translated through into ultimately into the schemes that come before you.
Yes, just for a little clarification, I would welcome the viaduct being planted up and used as a walkway, but it's a bit further west than the route that I'm talking about, from the bottom of Beeston Road along Nineveh Road and on a more direct route to the city centre.
Thanks. Both of those are identified as priority routes, in particular the Nineveh Road route, but as well as the opportunity for that viaduct project, as has been mentioned. And the brief sets out that should that project come forward, and I understand that there's feasibility work ongoing for that. That's separate to the council, but I understand there is a project live on that at the moment. That development will need to safeguard access to it and provide that opportunity to provide connections to the viaduct as well. So both of those routes are clearly quite important.
Do you have any quick comments from members? Dan?
Thank you. Yeah, I am really anxious about the weight aspect being attached here. And actually, particularly just from experience of sitting on the panel, the number of times that the officer presenting says, well, it's policy compliance, however, it doesn't really meet the guidance. And we say, well, we want to make sure it meets the guidance. And our own officers say, well, it's policy compliant, we can't. And I really feel that if we're serious about this, then it needs to become part of an adopted policy that forms part of our planning framework in the same way as it would if it were a neighbourhood plan that is a key planning consideration for anything that comes within this area. I'm really impressed with it as a document. Truly, I am. I don't want anyone to take away anything other than that. Equally, I know, having sat on this panel for some years, that guidance will simply not be lived up to by developers. And so long as they fall within a policy, we will lose at an appeal. And that's a reality.
Can I just say, Abby, that I was in London last week and I wanted to see the Shard. You know, I particularly wanted to see the Shard. Were you? And as planners will know, as you know yourself, the Shard was very much the anchor for bringing investment into the area. It seems to me that we need something like that. You know, what is built on Kickstarter will be very important. I don't particularly mean the Shard. I was more thinking of Temple Works, you know, and the end user in line. And it would seem to me that that would be a priority to try to get that off the ground as quickly as possible, you know, just to encourage investors to come in and come in line with the brief. So, okay. Thank you for a very interesting session, and I'm delighted that your brief went out live on television. So it will have reached a lot of people today as we went through one by one. And of course, we had the explanation with the plan. So that was all very useful. And it may well be when you consult with local people, something that could be used again, you know, as a kickstarting a conversation or getting the point across very succinctly, which you did with your graphics and your commentary. But thank you for that. And I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about it. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Thanks.
Can we have a 5-minute recess at this stage? Everybody says yes. Can we come back to order, please? I know there's one or two who have other things to do. Time push, we all have a bit of a time push, haven't we? Other meetings in the pipeline. Okay, can we go on to page 191 then? Agenda item 10. It was subject to a site visit today, the old Yorkshire Bank site on Merrion Way. Tim, can I ask you to introduce it before we bring in the applicants, please?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. As you say, you've asked me to do a brief introduction to the evolution of this site, really, and then I'll bring in George Tyson from Downing and his team, just to say that Chris Coulson from Asset Management was due to be here on behalf of the City Council, but unfortunately, due to a sudden bereavement in the family, he can't be here this afternoon. But notwithstanding that, we'll take you through the presentation. And the applicants have also prepared a model and brought some samples which are close to me at this end of the table. And if you'd like to come and have a look at that between what I'm going to say and their presentation, perhaps that's the best opportunity to do that. Okay, so the proposal is a pre-application proposal which refers on the slide to 2 blocks of student accommodation and a conference facility. To an extent, that's a misdescription. There are 2 blocks of student accommodation, but the third element is a multi-use events venue, which might actually accommodate some conferences when the opportunity arises. So it's not solely a conference facility. When an application does come forward, it will be in a hybrid form, in that the student accommodation blocks would be in detail, and detailed planning permission will be granted, and the multi-events venue would be an outline application, or outline permission would be sought, and they would be seeking to set the parameters for that scheme in relation to its footprint and scale. Yeah, bring it across that. Thank you. Right. So this image is bleached out, so I shan't dwell on it. But there are 2 plots of land. The larger southern plot relating to the Yorkshire Bank, which is the land south of the dotted blue line, and a piece of land owned by the City Council north of the dotted blue line, and a linear strip towards the northern end of the arena piazza. So we can see that in more detail from this aerial view. Just referring back to the Yorkshire Bank taking up the majority of the larger southern plots. Most of the landscape bund which sits to the north of it would form part of the plot. And just to say that the plots themselves are plots rather than specifically building footprints. And that's particularly the case in relation to the northern plot, the linear strip you'll see some details of later. Across Claypit Lane, there's Queen Square, a conservation area. And these images that I've borrowed really identify the evolution of the site and its surroundings over the past 160 years. Queen Square is a Georgian square, commenced in 1805 with the northeastern edge of the square completed in 1822. All those buildings constructed at that time are still there and are Grade 2 listed buildings. As you might notice from the diagrams, the circle sort of sits over the Yorkshire Bank. During the period of 1852, I think it is, to 1969, there's been changing conditions on the east side of Clay Pit Lane, so it's been a constantly evolving situation. And a view just from Queen Square, we've a couple of the Grade 2 listed buildings on the left-hand side, new brick buildings, slate roof, 2-storey and 3-storey elements with the bank in the background. Jumping now to 1978, planning permissions granted for the development of the Orchard Bank building. It was actually opened in 1984, I believe, but looking back at the plan in 1978, you see the building was proposed adjacent to the new Polytechnic building, which clearly now has disappeared underneath the arena effectively. And a view across the square from the western edge, the upper levels of the Yorkshire Bank serrated and stepping back in scale and height from the square. And a closer view just looking across Clay Pit Lane, where we see the polished finished granite surfacing of the building, very solid established building. But it's not a listed building, albeit could be considered to be a non-designated heritage asset. In 2001, the Unitary Development Plan was adopted, and as part of that, we identified the area to the north of the Merrion Centre and land on the west side of Clay Pit Lane and north of the Inner Ring Road as a prestige development area. As part of that, we specifically encouraged large-scale landmark buildings in this area. And I guess partly in response to that, we saw the first larger building in the area, which was the Sky Plaza building, the 34-storey student house sitting behind Yorkshire Bank in this view. Subsequently, the Brunswick building, the Leeds Polytechnic Brunswick building, and next slide, please. The surface car park north of Elmwood Way were brought together and combined, and a planning application was submitted for the development of the arena. And in common with the proposal now, that was an outline planning application which established first of all established the parameters for the arena, and subsequently during the period of 2009 to 2012, members saw and supported the developing detailed design of the building. And the building itself opened in 2013. In 2010, we adopted the Tall Buildings SPD, and taking the prestige development areas on a step, the land to the north of the Merrion Centre, extending along the Inner Ring Road, was identified as having an opportunity for a cluster of tall buildings. And in response to the development of the arena, and with support from the Tall Buildings SPD during recent years, we've seen those being the catalyst for significant investment along or around this area, including the extension of Merrion House and several new tall buildings along Merrion Way. The two new buildings immediately behind Yorkshire Bank, 17 and 27-storey, referred to as White Rose View. And at the east end of Merrion Way, the latest building to open, it's still got scaffold on that picture, but it's now opened, is Alters House on the former site of Hume House. That's a 37-storey student accommodation building. Most recently, planning permission has been granted for the redevelopment of Arena Point, which would be a 44-storey building in the middle of that group. This image gives an illustration of the way in which we've tried to manage the change in scale as different developments have come forward along Merrion Way, recognising the character and scale of space in Queen Square with a step up in height towards the centre of Merrion Way and Arena Point, and then stepping back down in scale towards Wade Lane. And finally from me, this image is just capturing the evolving townscape and cityscape in this part of the city. And really at this point, I'll pass over to George and his team. But if you'd like to take the opportunity, first of all, to have a look at the model, perhaps you'd do that now. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for that introduction and background. I think, yes, if we have a look now, and then we'll invite the applicants to present the pre-app. Good afternoon and welcome. You're free to make your presentation when you can. Please introduce yourself for the benefit of YouTube and members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I'm George Tyson from Downing. Thank you for taking the opportunity, giving us the opportunity this afternoon. We are the applicant and the sponsor of the student accommodation side of this this application. The outline element of it relating to the multi-purpose event space is sponsored by the council. As Tim mentioned, unfortunately, the officer isn't here today to talk to that, but I think there's sufficient background in the report. 10 minutes isn't long, so I purely cover the introduction to Downing, and the rest of the application or the rest of the presentation, Simpson Huff will present to. Downing are a developer. Secondary, we are an investor operator of student accommodation of 30 years standing. We've developed all over the UK and more than one scheme in Leeds, and it's not only student accommodation that we've done. We've been in front of you guys more than once. As we go through the presentation, there's a lot of information there, some of which we'll have to skip over because we haven't got enough time in 10 minutes, but we hope we've got the opportunity to cover all the points that are of interest to you. And also we've got the question and answer session to deal with any specific queries. So I think that's enough for me in terms of scene set, and I'll pass you over to the architects, if that's okay.
Thank you, George.
Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Ayres from Simpson Huff Architects. Oh, no, yeah. My name's Ian Simpson, founding partner of Simpson Huff Architects. So Tim's been through quite a lot of the detail in the background, so I'll skip over these quite quickly if I can. You obviously understand where the site is and the photos of the site and the arena, the existing context. Tim mentioned that the site is adjacent to Queen's Conservation Area. It's identified in the draft SPD tall building area on the north side, which we are calling Block A. The Yorkshire Bank site isn't, so the tall building SPD skirts up the edge of Brunswick Terrace. We've got the emerging context that's changed significantly over the recent period, particularly on Merrion Street, where a significant number of taller buildings have come forward, as the case officers highlighted. As part of our development proposal, we've looked at the significance of the climate change emergency, and particularly how we can address that and build that into the scheme, and looking to better the requirements from the council if and where possible. In terms of the design parameters, and apologies, this slide has very bleached out, but really how we can tie into the Queen's Square, although the square was never formed as a four-sided element, or Clay Pit Lane running through it, how we can address that, how we can reinforce Clay Pit Lane, how we can keep the parameters of the view of the main entrance of the arena, which is something that's quite important, that significant entrance across the plaza there from Clay Pit Lane looking east. How we can work in with the existing context that's developed along Merrion Way with the stepping up from west to east, and how we can really introduce active frontages and movement within the site and around the site, and reinforce the areas of activity, particularly crossing Merrion Way going up Brunswick Terrace from the Merrion Centre. We spent quite a lot of time exploring the form of the building, which is designed specifically for this site and its relationship with the arena. So the angles that you can see on that are very much derived from creating a view and vista of the entrance and the setting of the arena. And so through that experience, we were able to create this very subtle, unique, faceted form that will be like a crystal rising as a counterpoint to the arena. It's about the same height as the arena is in length. So there's quite a nice composition of
the vertical and the horizontal there. And these are some of the initial studies that we did where we tested the form before we became aligned with the crystalline triangulated form at the bottom. So we'd had a whole series of stepping forms before we were able to simplify that into an elegant, reflective, creased form that will capture the light in some quite extraordinary ways.
So in terms of the program we've got 3 buildings across the site, 2 of which are student accommodation. Working from the south, we've got what we're calling Block B, which addresses Merrion Way, Claypit Lane and Brunswick Terrace, wrapping round, working off the geometries of Merrion House, the other side of the road. It's about 20 metres across the street width in that location, reinforcing the trees along the street there. And then moving up, we've got the multi-purpose event space highlighted in purple on this element, which is, as highlighted, a hybrid application outline, parameter plans of what it could be, with the main entrance off the plaza addressing the entrance to the arena. And then this crystalline form, as Ian talks about, on the north side of the site, adjacent to the inner ring road, with the main entrance coming off Claypit Lane. And this form that wraps around and leaves approximately half of the grassed area at the moment free for public usage. And we've got some plans going up, and it's a typical student plan with amenity space mixed in with standalone studios, and then cluster bedrooms, which are 5 or 6 bed clusters with a shared living and kitchen area within that. Approximately 60% of the units within the whole development would be cluster bedrooms, and the remaining 40% would be standalone studios. Taking on board some of the comments from the conservation officer and elements, we have tried to step back the parameter plans for the arena. It's cutting away from Queen Square, and looking to utilise PV cells wherever possible and air source heat pumps to create on-site air energy usage. We've talked about the standard sizes for the rooms, which meet the draft SPD on student sizes, 20 square metres for a studio, 13 square metres for a cluster bedroom. In total, we're looking at 1,200 units split between 720 units in Building A, the taller element to the north, and 543 units in the south. The multipurpose event space would be just shy of 10,000 square metres, with a main exhibition floor of 3,000 square metres, and then various ancillary elements, pre-function circulation, fixed event space, and then the public welfare, the storage, back of house areas you'd expect with that.
These are a couple of images just of where we are with the design at the moment. It's the idea that the faceted form captures the light in different ways and at different seasons. And it's something we have a lot of experience with. If you remember last year, I was here talking to you about our Merrion Street building, which was a shimmering tower on Merrion Street. And this, I think we hope to have a similar quality. It's foreshortened on that image in the that I'm looking at now. It's better in the brochure. And then the Building B is really a series of interlocking terraces, stepping down, trying to adopt the grain and texture of the street, following round and with a high point, and then it steps down towards Queen Square and addresses Queen Square with a low level piece that tries to pick up the coloration. Now, again, the color is, we're at early stages in terms of the materiality, but at the moment we're suggesting it might be light color. But again, we might start to suggest that those could be varying colors and a palette that work well together and work with the offsetting of the blocks that we've managed to achieve. Yep. And this is just the massing study looking back at Building B and Building A and the event space sitting in between that, which obviously is a lot of work to do in terms of designing that. These are just some indicative images of materiality. We want, as I say, to reinforce a flush reflective surface, and we're suggesting polished anodized aluminium and glass and natural ventilation to the rooms. Next. Want to follow on?
And so building B, as Ian said, a kind of a more textured relief within the facade there, looking at terracotta, anodized aluminium for the vent panel cover, and then glass again for the windows, trying to maximize the light into the rooms wherever possible, and the outlook for the students inside.
And varying the grid so that we get some variety, not only in plan form, but also in expression.
As we have some sectional elevations here, again, slightly squished, so looking slightly fatter and wider than they are in reality. But it gives you an indication of how the building sits within the context. The top right corner, which is a bit bleached out on the screen behind, but sitting at 180 meters AOD, the ground level in the area is 60 meters AOD, there or thereabouts. So approximately 170 meters high. So we're just slightly smaller than the tallest currently consented elements on Merrion Way. And in terms of the landscaping, looking to, we will lose some trees, but looking to replace them wherever possible, and to fill those areas in, reinforcing the street, improving the trees that are damaged, particularly down on Brunswick Terrace, which haven't survived as well as possible, and replacing the dead ones. So increasing the tree count and looking wherever possible to increase them both on and off site, utilising just about just over half the site on Block A site, and retaining the public access area onto the plaza with the mound, and then a public area within the courtyard elements behind Block B. You can see between the Block B and the south and the multipurpose event space, and again seeing where we can introduce trees on the street edge as well and reinforcing that. So a mixture of public areas for the landscaping, retaining that in the plaza, and some private landscaping here. We've also got roof terraces on Block B where the students can enjoy some external amenity as well. And some indicative sections. Servicing is up on Elmore Close on the top for building A, and then down on Brunswick Terrace, on Brunswick Terrace for the multipurpose event space, and Merrion Way for the Block B at the south. Thank you very much. Almost got the timing right. Very close.
Thank you. Very good time in that. A lot to cover in such a short time, but you did very well. Thank you. Questions from members? Neil? We nearly got a comment, you're right. Questions? Neil?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for your presentation, folks. Just, you had a lot of ground to cover quite quickly. Appreciate it's only a pre-app and there's a long way to go yet. Could you just run over again your approach to low to zero carbon and all that agenda, if you would?
Yeah. So 3 facets to that really. There's obviously the design construction element of it. There's the operational and there's the end of use. So what we've looked at doing is the easiest bit to deal with is the operational, because we've got a client who is an end user operator, so they know what they're using elsewhere, they know what we can do, and we know how we address that. So we are looking to move away from traditional gas boilers, CHP, which we've done in the past, and now looking to a full electric system utilizing air source heat pumps and PV cells. So we are looking in terms of operational, so the 20% guidance for Leeds betterment on Part L 2013, I believe, we're looking to go to 30% on that, and that's by dint of using some rather large air source heat pumps, which we're hiding on the roof. In terms of the more difficult elements, which is the design, it is effectively and simply about good procurement and utilizing materials that are well sourced. So if we can get aluminium that is built, smelted via hydroelectric rather than coal fired, it's looking at that. So into the specification, we will include a guidance on producing environments performance declarations about how and where the materials are coming from, and then fundamentally just minimizing the amount of material in it. The biggest one is the frame and the substructure, and how can we get that down? So there are multiple ways we're looking at that. We're developing that at the moment. And then at the end of that is how we can then look at those materials and recycle that. And again, that's the specification and the design and the kind of documentation that will go with the building to the end of life. Does that help in any way? Yeah.
Still see no questions. So, oh, David's jumped in.
On the present Yorkshire Bank building, there is a green space in front of that which we're gonna lose a significant number of mature trees. Is there any way that those could be saved? Because I think they're important. That is a busy corner, and that's soaking up carbon from cars. And I think taking them out, and I know you're going to replace them with new trees. It's not going to do the same job. And then I've got a question for officers.
We can certainly look at how those trees on the corners, we've tried to retain as many as possible, and the ones that are suffering, and I understand from my colleague from Reform who have done a tree survey in the area, it's really about how we can improve the substrates that they're in at the moment to some of the ones, particularly on Brunswick Terrace, which are suffering and not doing as well. How can we improve that life of those? But I take on board your comments and see what we can do on those.
I don't know if any of our officers can answer this, but I mean, I remember one or two of us on this committee were on the committee, the chair, Councillor Lassie and myself at least, were on this committee when we gave planning permission, went all through the planning permission for the arena. And we understand the issue about the piece of land where you want to put the tall building, that's currently ours and it's part of a land swap deal with us. And it was always understood that and if the Yorkshire Bank was rebuilt, and the piece of land at the side of the Yorkshire Bank would be used. But quite honestly, what we were told then is nothing like what is being proposed. It was we were led to believe it would be an ancillary task towards the arena, and that it wouldn't overshadow the arena, and that does. So can somebody tell me what's changed?
Well, I'm happy to start. I think Tim wants to come in. Tim, I mean, I recall that those sites were development plots. We were quite clear at the time the arena was developed that there were going to be development plots, even though in the intervening years they become green spaces. And at that time, we didn't have any specific plans. So I don't recall any presentation of what would go on those plots. But yes, there could be a wide range of possible uses, you know, but that was 8 years ago. And what's coming forward, what's big is this student housing use. So I think that's probably the best way I can answer the question. Tim might have more detail because he was closely involved, but really what we're asking members is what are your views on the current proposals, not what was put to you 8 years ago. So I think that's a key question. Thank you, Chair.
And I feel like I should tell you more detail, but there isn't very much more detail to add. When we dealt with the arena planning application, the areas which were referred to as development plots were very much that they were out with the arena planning application. So there was illustrations on the drawing saying development plots, but there was no detail in relation to what those might be because they didn't form part of the application. And the council, as developer, did that intentionally because they wanted to give reference to some future possibility of development, but didn't want to tie themselves down to any particular scale or form of development. So to all intents and purposes, what we're seeing today is the very first time that we've actually had proposals brought forward on those plots. So it's for members to make comments on those really for the first time. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Caroline, please.
Thank you. A question for the architect, please. When I read through the paper and I looked at the presentation, I felt that I was completely in favour of the materials and the approach and the appearance of the buildings. Looking at the model, I'm less convinced about the three-dimensional relationship between the shapes of the tower and the arena. Can you convince me?
It's always a rod for your own back if you bring a model, because it's obviously you cannot get it's even a CGI is very difficult to capture the sort of the language and the reflection that we're going to get of the faceted form. It's a very small footprint, which means it can sit quite elegantly, and the way that it's faceted means that when you're moving around the city, you'll see very slender vertical strips reflecting light in quite different ways. So it's in many ways it's a much more elegant expression of a 130-meter tower than you would normally get, which would normally be four-sided and quite blocky. And I think the way that it pulls off the arena, and you've got the soft form of the arena in a way as an oval. Okay, there's angles within that, within the cladding, but in plan it's quite a soft form. And then we'll get this taller, elegant, reflecting marker almost for the arena. It's almost a sign for the arena from within the city, particularly with the scale of the landscape and the topography. I think this will be a good counterpoint to the arena, and it will have a sculptural quality in itself in the way that the arena has a sculptural quality, and we'll work very hard to make sure that it reads legibly as this crystal rather than a traditional student block with punched windows. So I'm really excited about the form. I mean, those were my sketches that you saw in the early stages, and it's evolved into something that I think will be a unique landmark that will sit comfortably with the arena and is articulated away from the arena, and pulls away and it maintains the view of the arena entrance from Claypit Lane. So I think it's a good, almost like a lighthouse marker for the arena, and I personally feel it complements the form. I'm just always doubtful about bringing models. It's just I think the real buildings are always 100 times better than anything we can create, but I'm very excited about the scale of that and the way that it's fractured in a way that allows us to create a small footprint, but something that even on Claypit Lane, we have an inverted V there, so that we break down those facades, and that image is a dusk image, but a daytime image with a light will really reinforce the vertical on that.
I hear what you say about models. Graham and maybe some of us, and Liz might remember the architect who brought on a model that was made of cheese. So we said, well, we quite like the gorgonzola, but we're not very keen on the brie. Very brave thing to do. Do you remember that, Liz? Yeah.
Just to say, I do accept that we're looking at the model from a different angle, that we'll be looking at that arrangement in real life. And thank you for that really well articulated response that you've given us. I don't know whether Steve would have any comment to make on that response.
Thank you, Councillor. No, I think at this stage, as it's a pre-app, I'd be much more interested in hearing members' views. You know, they've a long way to go. We'll be having a lot more discussions with them. So I think, in fairness to members and the applicants, it's not really my place to comment at this stage. And I'd be more interested in hearing what members think of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I think that's wise at this stage. Kaylee, please.
Thanks, Chair. We've met before in the pre-app that you had with me as a ward member. Oh, sorry. Is that better? Yeah, we met before. Nice to see you again. So have you had a look at what would happen if the light hit the building in such a way as to that, like, is there a danger of the treatment dazzling drivers? That's one of my concerns, because it is right next to a very busy road, and that's something that I did raise in the pre-app before as a ward member. And also, is there anything you can do to mitigate the loss of view of the arena?
I think obviously we will and have carried out quite significant dazzle studies.
Yeah, they're ongoing. So we believe it won't be an issue, but we haven't had the final report.
There will be a detailed report on that. And in fact, the shape of the building is pushed as far to the north as it possibly can and angled, so that from a particular point on Clay Pit Lane, which we were advised by officers to take a viewpoint from, it doesn't obstruct the view of the arena at all. So we've pushed it and shrunk it as tight as we can. And it's really, to me, framing the edge of the arena. And I think that's, you know, it couldn't be any smaller than it is at the moment, and push further to the north.
Yeah, I mean, to reiterate what Ian has said there, if the further north we go, the closer we're getting to the inner ring road, and we do have an easement, a no build zone, and we're almost up against that now. We're up against that. What we've strived to do is to make sure that we've got views from when you're looking at the main entrance on Clay Pit Lane, you can see either side and the edges of the arena, so you can read the form of that when you look at the entrance, which is something we've been through with the officers in quite a lot of detail.
We can show some, as we come forward, we'll show some, because I've seen preliminary images of that view with the tower to one side and a good vista of the arena, and the full complete form of the arena exposed.
Have you brought it with you?
I don't think we've got that image, have we? Send it to you.
We look forward to seeing that view at the next stage, whatever is. Liz, please.
Are we finished with questions?
This is the last question.
Oh, all mine's a comment. So if you, well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I must congratulate you on proposing to knock down Yorkshire Bank, because I must be, from this morning's site visit, I know I'm in a minority, but I think there's an ugly building in Leeds. It's second only to the Mint, which I think takes the biscuit, really. But okay, we're not here to talk about what you're getting rid of. What David said about when we agreed with a lot of pride the arena application, it was most certainly raised during discussions and during the panel meetings that the two bunds, whilst not being part of the red line for the arena, they were envisaged as having somewhere to put ancillary developments of some sort. Something which enhanced the experience of people attending the arena, something where on Sunday nights they could spend their time in the forecourt there, perhaps with a drink or whatever. And I've always had that in mind ever since then. And so it came as quite a big surprise to me that you're wanting to do what you're wanting to do. And could I also say that I think what you're proposing is a quite beautiful building. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. It's just not where I would have wanted to see it. You know, whatever you say, look at your model, go stand in front of the arena and visualize something that size in front of you. And I personally think it is going to, if it happens, is going to detract from something of which most of us who sat on the panel at that time were inordinately proud. We thought that we'd got a cracker in that arena, and this, which may well happen, I think is going to detract a great deal from it. The other little bit of building, fine. I've not got a big problem with that, apart from I do hope that you don't go for red brick as you're suggesting, because I think that in red brick or dark coloured materials there, it's so in your face and so it just leaps out. And I do think that it ought to be a little bit more of a retiring building. I think I've got the gist of my feelings across there. Beautiful building. And I know it's a preferred site, but that's not an instruction, it's just a preference. And I really do think that it's going to spoil something which I'm proud of. Thank you.
Right, first of all, about the trees, I remember commenting on the trees at the time, and oh, we've already decided and they're going to be planted. If you have the right species of tree, then they wouldn't die, but quite a few of them have. Anyway, getting onto the development in front of us, when we discussed the arena, the panel took a considerable amount of time discussing its design. And the first design was told, it was John Thorpe, go away and come back with our suggestions, which he did. And I agree with Councillor Latte. We are very proud of that building, of that design. It's like a scallop shell, actually, in shape. And particularly at night when it's lit up, it looks absolutely gorgeous. I agree with Councillor Latte. I think the glass crystal building, as you call it, to the north of the site is a very beautiful building, but that is not the right place for it. I think it does detract from the arena. It's got no relationship to the arena. And on the south side, I'm looking at your illustrations on page 101. I mean, it's very blocky. Surely you can do a bit better than that. And I don't like the way from the model it illustrates it more. It takes up that landscape space, and it does obscure the view of the arena, not completely. But we want that splay of vision of the arena. So I can't vote for it as it is now. It needs a lot more work. The Crystal Tower, well, it's too tall for a start in that area. And if you submitted a plan to build it elsewhere, you'd get my vote, but not there.
Thank you, Chair. Like the previous two speakers, I think I've got to agree with them. That building in another site would be beautiful, but not where it's been proposed. And I've got to say, if we might have not taken some decisions we did about the arena, and if we knew something like that was going to be proposed in front of it a few years later. On the Yorkshire Bank, I've got to say, this was the first disagreement of this morning, because I disagree with Councillor Latty. I think Yorkshire Bank's all right, but anyway. I've got to say what you're proposing there, I've not got a lot of problems with. I've just concerns about losing the trees, and if you can do anything about that. The only thing I have about the other building is is not the building that you're building for yourselves. It is the sort of purple bit, which is going to be a Leeds City Council thing. I think when an application comes back, I would want to see what that looks like in context, because I do believe how that looks affects the arena, and we've got to look at it in terms of that. But as I say, as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't want to have the large crystal building sat in front of the arena, because I don't think it belongs there.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting. Colleagues who've been on the panel for some time have said that it was never intended that these areas would be used in this way. So it was merely guidance, I think. That's I think the reality is that any development over 7 stories, if I've counted right, is going to block the predominant view you have from the street scene of the arena. And therefore, unless we're going to say you can't have anything taller than 7 stories on that front site, I think, and I can't see that that's going to be a sustainable argument at any stage. I don't know what was said in those meetings. All we can look at is what is before us. And if it is permissible in terms of policy to put a tall building there, then it's permissible in terms of policy to put a tall building there. Which then brings me to the building itself. I actually think, like colleagues, I think it's a stunning building. When I look at it at the presenting angle, as you would be driving towards the arena, actually reminds me a little bit like the Flatiron building in New York, just in terms of that triangulation. I think it's going to become a landmark. I think it. I must go, when I saw the model, like I was no fan, but when I look at, I like the blue skies as well, to permanently be over Leeds as well. That's a different issue. But I think it's, I understand colleagues' concern about the lack, the removal of some of the view of the arena, but anything you build there is going to block that. So it's going to be built on. And so it's a question of, can we have the highest quality of building possible? And I must say, I think that genuinely, I think it is architecturally stunning. And I think it really enhances the area. My final comment is a reservation I have made a number of times, which is it is another student development. And I don't know how many times colleagues and I are going to have to raise concern about every building, every tall building that comes forward in this panel is a student development. I think the students of this city are awesome. I am proud that I sit on Leeds University Court. I think the contribution of students to the Leeds city economy and our city are integral and fundamental. But we're not just a student city. And it worries me that every single large-scale development that comes forward in the city centre is a student development. And in fact, until students came back, the impact over the past 18 months, the impact on city life was really noticeable. And I'm concerned that unless strategically we start to address that, we are building up a real problem for the future, because demand for universities ebbs and flows. So when I was a student, Manchester was the place. Everybody, if you didn't go to Manchester, there was clearly something wrong with you. I went and I left. I'll leave that as it. At the moment, Leeds is the city of choice. But in 10, 15 years, that will change. I hope it doesn't, but it may well. And we'll have all these very tall buildings with nobody in them. And I worry. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's, as perhaps echoing some of Councillor Cohen's and other colleagues' comments, this is a bit of a mixed bag, really, isn't it? Looking at the sliver type building is a very impressive building, and almost anywhere else in the city centre would be very welcome. I do think this is a location for high buildings, Chair. I think that's an accepted principle, generally speaking, in this area. But it's in this area there's been a considerable amount of development of late, and due to our current unpleasantness, the city's not really experienced what all that means for that area. You know, that we don't know quite what all those buildings having that purpose-built student accommodation use will have on that area. We've not really experienced that, and that does give me some pause, Chair. I think the quantum of development in that general area is a concern. Its nature is largely student, and look, capital is following the biggest returns, right? And when we were updating our core strategy, Chair, if you cast your mind back to 2011, 2012, we wanted to put a test for demand, and you know, a necessity test into the core strategy, and the government planning inspector to remove that, saying it would interfere in markets. Unfortunately, this is what you see. There is a dash to build purpose-built student accommodation because market is following the best short to medium term returns. And that's something as a city we have to contend with. And you end up with planning applications like this when we then try to solve all the problems of the world through the planning system. And that's always somewhat of a challenge, Chair. So I like a lot of elements of this. I like the applicants' contributions regarding climate. I think they were very welcome. They understand that the way we're going in Leeds is towards zero carbon buildings. They understand that. I think that's to the good. The design of the shard type building, the silver type building, we call it, is impressive. I accept that. The larger student square blocks, it's much less impressive. It's very generic. It's what we see a lot of in the country. And I just think, Chair, if it's just not just too much on that location, and the quantum of development will just feel like too much, and we'll be adding to it if we say, for example, passing this today, which obviously we know it's the start of a process. So I do worry about the totality of it all. As I think Councillor Blackburn's mentioned, we do need to see from the applicants, plural, about what this purpose-built multifunction arts entertainment space will look like. That would be a good complementary building to the arena. That would give us an interesting collection of buildings that have those kind of uses in the area. But we need to see an awful lot more of that. Appreciate the Yorkshire Bank building divides opinion. It must be unique now looking like that. So perhaps you should have a stay of execution, but that's not what we're deciding, Chair. But I do have a certain fondness for it. So I just think it's the total impact, the intensity of use on that site. I accept it's a large building site, but it's the uses of it, Chair. It's almost a shame that the sliver building's not coming forward as an apartment building, a general apartment building, and that'd be a very interesting place for an apartment building. So I have some concerns, Chair, as I've explained, but there is some ways to go, isn't there? So thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know where to start with this. So I think probably first of all, in the report 6.5, it says the site is not specifically identified in the SAP. However, land around the periphery of the Yorkshire Bank building is identified as green space. Now, this is my ward and I represent it, but if a development was coming forward for someone else's ward that proposed to develop, probably not designate a green space, but it's identified in the SAP as green space, I won't be happy about that either. So I don't think that that's yeah, like treating my ward any different. I think in terms of the massing, it, as I said in the pre-app, it does very much feel plonked. You've got the arena, and that is a landmark in and of itself, and there's a lot of decorative, a sort of decorative at night time, like presence about it. So I think it'd be a real shame to block that off. And I think as well, it removes the human scale. When we're on the site visit earlier, sort of stood there and I'm looking at the Unite building just over the road, and then I'm trying to imagine that height but slightly taller, and I'm stood there next to the arena, and I'm looking up and I'm going, oh no, it's horrible. I don't like it. But as colleagues have said, the design of the building is indeed beautiful. So it's just a shame it's proposed to go where it's being proposed to go. So I've got, hang on, let me look at what I've written. So not human scale. Oh, I agree. We do need some strategic oversight with regards to student accommodation. Yes. And yeah, just sort of reiterate that students do need somewhere to live. So it's not the principle of a student accommodation development. It's, I think for me, it's the principle of development on that little strip of bunding. So thank you, Chair.
I think with regards to the Yorkshire Bank site, I'll not be sad to see that go. I'm not a fan of that. And I think probably what you've got going on there is replicating what you've got further down Merrion Street there, and I think that's probably okay with a few tweaks. I think the green space is a bit of an issue there of how much green space you can retain and still keep that development. Then we come to the tower, don't we? I mean, I don't want to be impolite to members that were on the panel when the arena was passed, but if you didn't want anything in front of it, why didn't you bring the arena further forward, or was there a specific reason for that? But you always knew you were going to get something in front of it, and you've had 7 or 8 years without anything in front of it. And I don't discount the view when you come down Scotthall Road, which is probably the best view of the arena that you actually see, but we've had that view for quite a long time, and I feel all the eyes looking at me. I'm thinking they're going to get me when I go out of the room. But isn't it time for a change? And is this the right sort of change? It is going to be a very iconic building, and I think it's going to be a nice building. It's going to be very tall, it's going to be very thin, and it's going to be in front of something that you all like. But is change all bad? That's the question I would sort of leave you with, maybe. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, thanks. I agree with what a lot of other people have said. I'm not a fan of this, really. I like the open space around the arena. I like the green space. I like the grassy knoll. It's well used. I've seen people going to the arena sitting on the grass before they go in. I think that's very human. It's really good to give people that opportunity to do that rather than it all be paved and concrete. And even if you have benches and things, it's just not the same. It feels an slightly informal space in the middle of the city, which I really, really like. I understand we may have to lose some, and I think that's a real shame. It also somehow looks and feels quite safe as an area because it is a human sort of space. And I think that is also desperately important, rather than having a lot of buildings with square edges here and there and everywhere, which doesn't give that feeling of openness, safety, and as well having a framework for the arena, which I agree is a lovely building. I'm neutral about the Yorkshire Bank building. I don't really care. But I do like the mature trees, and I also like the shrubby hedges. And the shrubby hedges actually are better for absorbing the pollution and exhaust than actual just one spindly trees somewhere. So I would like, whatever happens, that we emphasize hedges and have hedgerows around the place, because it is a very busy area and quite polluted. And I feel concerned about people who live just there and are walking here and there and absorb breathing all that air, which is terribly bad for them. Although to 15 years time, as I said before, perhaps that will be less of a problem with electric cars, but even so for now, that is a problem. In terms of the student development, it's a very luxurious building, and like other people, I think it is a pretty magnificent building, the Shard type building, but I don't think this is quite the right place. I also think that I'm in favour of having particular halls, developments for students, but I'd like to see them more mixed up with other parts of the city, not all in clumps. In my own wards, this has caused a certain amount of difficulty in some areas, very much so. And I think where students are more mixed with the rest of the population, it's just more of a natural way of being and a better way of developing a city, rather than a clump here of a certain type of person and a clump there of a certain type of person. I also think that it's important that student accommodation is more affordable, and I can't see this luxury building being terribly affordable, really. It's going to be another one that caters for particular students, and the rest of them are still priced out of it, which to me is a shame. So in terms of the south side, yes, I agree. It's too blocky for my liking. I think it could be developed in a more rounded way. And I would like to see the proposals for this multi-use area, which if it has to go over the grass, then it does, but perhaps we could look at having some more grass informal space in front and around the arena. Thank you.
Can I ask you to turn to page 212? There are a series of questions. I think we've answered many of them in our comments, but we'll do it formally. The first one, do members consider that the loss of office accommodation and proposed use of the site for multi-use events, building and student accommodation is acceptable in principle? Yeah, and the multi-story side, the multi-event thing, we're okay with, isn't it? I suppose it's the scale of students that you're okay. So that's guidance. I won't put a yes or no to that one because there isn't a yes or no, is it? Subject to confirmation of detailed proposals, do members support the approach towards living conditions for the student accommodation? I have to say that must be a yes, because we accept. If it was there, we accept those conditions all the time, don't we? Yeah, we can't do anything different once we've done it, and we've done it many times. Do members support the proposed scale and form of development? Well, I think you've answered that one, haven't you? Yeah. Although we do like the glitzy silvery building, the Shard.
I think we should just emphasise that whilst we don't we support that on this site, we do feel it's a quality piece of design.
It is. Okay, it's been captured that many times in the consideration. Do members consider that the development's proposed provision for transportation and accessibility are acceptable? I think it's in the report. Yeah, yeah, it's a low car, isn't it? You know, what we want to see. Subject to confirmation of details, do members support the approach to green space and landscaping around the development? Well, you've expressed an opinion on that one, haven't you? Yeah, okay. I did know we were going to have fun with this, by the way, when I reread them before we started. Subject to confirmation of details, do members support the approach to sustainable development? And that must be, oh yes, Neil. Yeah. Okay.
If I may, come back to the question about, which one was it? Do members support the proposed scale and form of development? I think the panel concentrated too much on the lovely building on the north side, but the south side, I think we have some concerns.
Well,
The
I think-
design's not good.
I think we generally expressed those
Yeah,
on the
okay,
question, didn't we?
okay.
Yeah. Okay, can I thank the developers for bringing it? We do like that iconic building. But thank you for that. It's lots of ideas, lots of comments to take away for consideration. And I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there at this stage. Thank you and good afternoon. Moving on then, and we need to be a bit quicker because we have meetings springing up, haven't we? Yep. Yeah, there will be. We won't. I don't. Sorry, can you come forward, please? I think I've got quite a list. I've got Michael, Peter, Jonathan, Adam, and Anna. You're all welcome to find some space at the back. Oh, well, is it? Do we have? Well, we're at the front, aren't we?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Right, you are, Chair.
Okay. That's just. I was just thinking we'd probably be breaking our own rules if 6 of them sit. Okay, can I say, Mike, we met you on site this morning. We are anxious to get started. It's been a long day for members, and some members have meetings coming up in less than an hour. Yep. Okay, when you're ready, please begin.
First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to introduce our proposals for Kirkstall Road. My name's Mike Briffis. I'm the project director for Clarion Housing Group. I just wanted to take a couple of moments just to introduce our scheme. Latimer Developments is the home building arm of Clarion Housing Group, which in itself is a non-profit organisation. All the proceeds of our developments are ploughed back into creating more housing for those that are not adequately served by the market. So we develop, we own and we operate, and therefore we are investing for the long term in sustainable communities. I just wanted to say a little bit about our founder because it's quite important in terms of our core purpose as an organisation. Clarion was founded by an Edwardian entrepreneur and philanthropist with a reputation for hard work, and he knew that to provide good quality homes for people to live was to provide them with a future. And our fundamental aim is really about good quality, affordable homes and neighbourhoods for people that have been failed by the market. With Clarion Housing Group comes Clarion Futures. That's our charitable foundation. We support skills and opportunities for more than 350,000 residents across our estate. We very much want to be part of the emergence of a new community at Kirkstall Road and help residents develop their future and maximise opportunities available to them. And one of the first steps on that journey is a project that we're already working on at Kirkstall Road with Leeds City Council and St George's Crypt, and that's to create some affordable modular homes for homeless. And we'd like to get that project up and running in early 2022. So I'm going to hand over to Pete now, who's going to talk you through our scheme. Thank you very much for now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pete. I'm the architect for the project, and I have the controls, hopefully. That was always going to go wrong, wasn't it? Apologies. Do I have a particular target?
Work for the last one, I think. You might have to tell me.
Okay. Sorry, apologies. Next. Thank you. Next. Thank you. Thanks very much. It would be more than a little adventurous of me to sort of talk to members at Leeds City Council about the city's assets and the emerging projects. What I do want to do, however, just briefly is touch on some of the character of the site. It's outlined there in red immediately to the west of the city centre. It is a fantastically well located site. It sits with about 300 metres of frontage onto Kirkstall Road. That gives us direct line of sight and access to the sustainable bus route that's in that location. And obviously it has that similar frontage onto the river. All of those are easy words to use. If you go there, as I think some of you did this morning, you'll find that it's very private site. It's gates and walls and railings, and only Mike has access to the passcodes, to the padlock. If you are invited and do get to go on the site, you'll find that you can't see the 300 metres of river frontage onto the river Aire. What you do get is 5 hectares of concrete. And that, I think, is something we really want to do something about. Next slide, please. Thank you. The site has an incredibly rich sort of industrial and manufacturing heritage, and that's really informed much of our thinking in terms of the architectural and planning of the site. It's also helped us with materials, grain, and some of the colours. Next slide, please. Thank you. I've really kind of struggled to find the words to capture the architectural character that we're looking for to ground our project in Leeds. So I've chosen a series of images there, and they all, for me, have a real commonality about them. And it is it's a kind of, I mean, I'm a northern boy, and it is this very robust kind of modesty which you get. And I mean, I absolutely love that. It's not overblown, it's not over detailed. It is just keep it simple, and you get elegant buildings out of it. And if you can make them out of natural materials, they are all the better for it. Next slide, please. Thank you. In terms of a project brief, my brief from Mike couldn't have been better. It was just, you know, make a great place to live. You know, throw away the boundaries, unlock the site, provide access to the river, make it welcome to our neighbours, be a community, but be part of an existing community. So again, you know, I'll talk a bit in a moment about the framework and how that's helped us bring that forwards. But what we want to be is as far as we can possibly get from a dormitory. We want to be a place where people come and visit us, and we move from our site and we connect way beyond the boundaries. Next slide, please. Thank you. Our members will be aware there are a number of consents on this site and other sites along the Kirkstall Road. You'll recognise the CR1 and 2 consents. Clearly, they are not going to come forwards because, as Mike said, his team will be delivering the project. For me, it has some commonalities, but it's certainly overburdened by surface car parking. Next slide, please. Just beyond our site, in the slightly white panel there, you'll recognise the Nissan garage there. Just so beyond our site, you've got the tannery planning consent there, sort of 650 residential scheme, a purpose-built to rent scheme. Again, from my perspective, slightly overburdened by car parking, but it does talk about a message of regeneration coming in the corridor. Next slide, please. So this framework document, we had some really great meetings with your members, you know, across all the disciplines, and this document has been incredibly informative in terms of how the project has come forward. Members will know this document as a framework that takes you from effectively I'm trying not to say bypass, the viaduct. Thank you very much. Thank you. From the viaduct to the west, and obviously down to the Wellington Bridge down at the south end of the site. Next slide, please. We're a key component of that, and the framework has some very specific asks of us. They're kind of simple asks, and then the sort of asks that all projects of this sort of scale should be delivering. So make a better road frontage, provide connectivity north-south, you know, make it possible for people to get to the river, connect the site east-west because it's a framework which has got about 1 kilometre of extent, and make a great place on the riverside. Next slide, please. Thank you. So that's the site in all its glory. Can't get on it, totally secured. Need to tap Mike up for the passcode. And as I say, 5 hectares of concrete. Next slide, please. If we have a reasonably good day today and subject to members' support, this is the project that we would like to bring forwards. What I'll now do is talk about how the project's evolved through the process of workshops with your officers. Next slide, please. So this takes me back to the Kirkstall Road framework document and how we've responded to that. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the opening thing is improve the frontage onto Kirkstall Road. Well, at the moment, that frontage is a boundary wall at the back edge of pavement. So what we're saying is let's take that wall away. Let's make it 6 to 8 metres of frontage. Next slide, please. Provide facilities for the enhanced cycle lane to come forwards, 4 metres of space for that to happen, and then upgrade the current pedestrian crossing so it becomes a two-can crossing, pedestrian and cycleway, and in that way improve access to not least Rosebank Primary School, but also to the eastbound buses running inboard. Next slide, please. So that's the character of the space that the master plan that we're looking to promote. So you'll see there a transformed landscape frontage along Kirkstall Road. The big space in the foreground there is that we're open for business. You're welcome. It's an open space. Please come into our site. And the sort of slightly pale grey building on the right-hand side is the second entrance into the site. Next slide, please. So another ask that comes out of the framework is provide this north-south, get me to the river route. And this is the green link down to the site. So you'll slightly see a cranked building on the top left-hand side there. That's, again, it's just a little nuance in the master plan that says we're open. Not we're closed down, not we're gated, not with walls as we are today, but we are open. So we just provide a wider threshold and make it possible for pedestrians and limited cars to get down into the heart of the site. Next slide, please. I beg your pardon, next slide, please. Thank you. In parallel with that, and as part of the upgrade of the Toucan crossing, we then want to bring a further route through the site, straight through a meandering route through the heart of the site that will then get us down to the river and from the river to a new bridge crossing. Next slide, please. Thank you. And the next slide, please. So we're proposing a completely remodeled bridge to get you across to Otter Island. And obviously that's a reciprocal arrangement. So Otter Island can then connect back to this site. Next slide, please. So that's the comprehensive north-south aspirations. Next slide, please. This is one of the fundamental things that comes out of the framework document, and this I think is a major win for the project. This is the east-west link. Next slide, please. What this east-west link does is it talks volumes about a kilometre of framework and how it will start to inform how the sites to the east come forwards and how the sites to the west come forwards. And you can see in grey under there how the tannery site recognises this aspiration for a link. Next slide, please. So this is the sort of character that exists on that link. It's not a highway, it's a home zone space. Yes, a limited number of vehicles will be able to use it, but it's a place where there is landscape space. There are 3-bed townhouses with garages. You can see 1, 2 and 3-bed flats in there with their own private balconies. But it's very much about a place that's got diversity of tenure, and diversity of property type. Next slide, please. So that's a kind of comprehensive north, south, east, west, please. Sorry, next slide, please. Thank you. So at the heart of the project then, this is the bit where we really say we're open, everybody in Leeds, come and be a part of this part of Leeds. Come and join us here. So you see little 4 arrows there bringing us to the heart of the project. Next slide, please. So this is an idea about a place where we've got a food offering. We've got, that's the kind of the big building in the middle ground there. The building with the number 7 on it there, the 07, that's kind of artist space, maker space. But again, it picks on this architectural character of the old industrial buildings. So we're playing with scale, but again, staying true to materials and simplicity of the buildings. In the foreground of that image, if we weren't at a high level, would be a little food store. And then to the extreme left of the image there, you start to see the student residential building. If you proceed through that image along the kind of avenue of green trees there, next slide, please, you will pop out at one of the other locations that's talked to in the framework, which is this active node on the riverside here. So next slide, please. Big pardon, and the next slide, please. Thank you. And good news, the sun's come out, and this is the riverfront side of the food court. The kids' play space is just beyond us to the right. But again, you see this agenda for very simple architectural aesthetic, true to the kind of the heritage of the buildings, and playing games with kind of little buildings and much heavier kind of warehouse buildings. Next slide, please. So if you step back now, you start to see more of the composition start to appear. So the bridge obviously running across to Otter Island. You see the food court with the blue panel in the middle of the image then, and this game of kind of climbing and tumbling buildings. Just very simple materials, very simple colors, and just trying to be very neutral. But you start to see how the
that would be time check.
Oh, crikey. Next slide, please. I'm enjoying myself. Forgive me. Sorry, Chair. I'm almost there, actually. I've lost my train of thought. Forgive me. Sorry, the final ask really of the framework, next slide, please, is the ask for a connection east-west along the riverside. We felt we could do better than that. And rather than have a riverside path, and those that have been to site will see the fast wall there, the flood defence wall, we think a riverside park is better than a riverside path. So next slide, please. That's the composition that comes together. And if you'll allow me, Chair, could I just briefly pass to my landscape colleague, Johnny, who has a couple of slides to talk to, and he'll talk more eloquently about the landscape than I possibly will. Next slide, please. And the next. And the next. Go.
Sorry, I'll make it as brief as I can. So Pete's talked quite eloquently about the different spaces in the landscape master plan. I think it's important to note that about 45% of the site is dedicated to landscape and public realm. and a significant proportion of that is green infrastructure, new garden spaces, the parkland area, and then those green links that Pete talked about. We want to plant approximately 250 trees across the site, which is a significant uplift in the green infrastructure, particularly on the base of what's there now, which is the sort of area of concrete, as Pete mentioned. Sustainability is a massive thing within the public realm and landscape. So we've made provision to introduce swales and rain gardens to help with surface water drainage, and really sort of make those sustainable elements obvious within the public realm and integrate those into the spaces that we're creating. We've really prioritised active travel. And where we have got vehicular routes, it's about creating a shared vehicular route that's accommodating both cars, pedestrians and cyclists in an equitable manner. So making sure that it's not a car dominated space, which is really important. We've integrated play into the park in particular. So there's a destination play space as you come off the bridge, but there's also informal play integrated into that park and that riverfront. We've worked really hard to integrate the flood wall into the park as well. So it feels like it's part of the design of the park and not an obvious intervention. And it all feels very integrated and one big green space for the whole of this community and the wider community there to enjoy. And then generally just emphasize the fact that it is very green. We've worked really hard to reduce the hard standing. Obviously the central space and the square is really important as a hard standing space, so we can hold events there and really make that a sort of a heart within development. But the rest of it is really about maximizing that green infrastructure and that green space. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that introduction, quite comprehensive. You've covered a lot of ground, and I was anxious to allow you a few extra minutes so that you had a chance to get across. As you'll know, many members on site, or the members who were on site, was rather thrilled with it. So I think I can use that word. Somebody looked at me, yeah. So if we go to the formal part, I'll invite members around the table to ask any questions they wish. And I see Councillor Walshaw's hand.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't make the site visit, but that was a fantastic presentation. When can we give you planning permission? So kind of put my hat in the ring there. No, more seriously, that was a very, very good presentation. I never liked the City Reach ones when they came forward, but they were, so this is such a huge step forward. Could you, I know it's a pre-app, but could you briefly outline your approach to low carbon, zero carbon and sustainability on site? That'd be really helpful.
Sorry, certainly. Thank you for the commentary. The big starting point for us is do everything you can do passively. Is a great, so let's do, I'm assuming I'm telling you things you already know about thermal performance and windows and steel buildings and all those sorts of things. Decarbonising the grid is a massive win for us. So we are all electric. So we're air source heat pumps, as you would expect, and PVs in the appropriate proportion. Because there's good and bad about PVs. Sorry, you clearly know. So that's the simple agenda. And then let's talk about sustainable transport. We are a city centre location, so let's walk, let's cycle, and let's make all those things possible. There is a slide, if members have seen it, in the bottom of the pack that identifies something like 1,125 cycle parking spaces, a dedicated cycle hub. So we want to make it possible for people to cycle who don't necessarily want to own a bike. Maybe they can rent a bike for £1 for an hour and off they go. So that they're the kind of the humble parts of the agenda. Mike, I don't know, you can pick up some bits.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think it's really important that I just maybe give some context about the brief that we've set to the team, and that's all really wrapped up in our sustainability route map to 2025. That's based around 5 pillars, and that's the guidance that we're giving to our teams, not just on this project, but across all of the projects that we're working on. And that's really about these 5 sort of key pillars. The first of which is about creating social value. So I mentioned in my introduction the project that we'd like to introduce, which is building some modular homes on site as early as possible to take homeless people off the streets and give them a home. We've got what we hope is a sort of an aspiration through that project to not just take a smaller group of people off the streets and give them a home, but to work with them to give them skills, and then hopefully they can become residents in our scheme. That's the golden thread that we would like to see. Beyond that, there's lots of other things that we can do around social value, which really cut to the purpose of what Clarion's about at its very core, which is about creating new communities. The other pillars, and I won't spend too long dwelling on them, but are really all around energy and carbon, around being planet friendly. So that's about, you know, the way in which we specify and design materials, and where those materials come from, and where the people who build the development come from. And then being adaptable and resilient. So, you know, we know that we've got a climate crisis that we're all facing into, and the steps that we need to take across this development to make sure that that remains a very resilient community. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Kaylee, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for name dropping Rosebank. Much appreciated. Much loved local primary school, and hopefully a lot of children will be attending there from this development should it come forward. I've just got a bit of I've just got a couple of questions with regards to, because obviously you've not had a whole lot of time, and again this is another pre-app that I've had pre-app discussions with you guys on, but I was just wondering how you've developed the community spaces. Like, would it be a sort of self-organization thing, or would it be staffed? Would there be opportunities for small groups to just come in and use it for free, or would it be like a small fee to use it? And then also in terms of like the creative spaces, because obviously this site has a lot of existing creative organizations, I guess, existing on site. Would you be willing to work with some of those organizations, or to support any creatives who sort of already use the site as it is? Yeah, thank you.
I'll thank you for the question. I think the first thing to mention, which again I mentioned very briefly in my introduction, is Clarion Futures. That's our charitable foundation. We do a lot of work with residents and across a number of different work streams, one of which is Clarion Communities. We looked through that organisation to set up not-for-profit organisations, so helping people start their own business with grants and what have you. The community space, or the ground floor commercial space that we have across the site as part of the application, we're keeping very flexible in terms of how that might be used. So that's the basis on which the planning application is currently being drafted. We are having a number of conversations at the moment about potential organisations and partners that we could work with to operate that space. Probably wouldn't say any more about those conversations at this moment in time, but certainly a lot of the things that you mentioned in your question are things that we'd be very interested in doing.
Thank you. You say that in paragraph 3.2 that you have an expected uplift to 35% of affordable housing subject to grant funding. How likely is it that this will come through? That's one question. I've got a couple of others. Secondly, about the student housing, is it going to be another luxury student apartments that are, to my mind, very expensive that students can't afford, or will your principles of affordability extend the student hall as well, so that actually students who can't afford £255 a week or even 150 will still be able to live there? I think it's great that students are mixed up with other residents. I think that's the way forward. And finally, the landscape space. I note that there's a children's play area and also a less formal areas. I hope it's going to be nice, adventurous type of landscaping that children or indeed older people can really play in, sit on the grass, just enjoy, not in a sort of formal walking along, looking rather respectable type of way. Thank you.
Again, thanks for the question. I think I can remember or the 3 or 4, but so I'll start with the affordable housing provision. So yes, we would like to deliver up to 35% affordable housing across the site, subject to grant funding. We are in discussions with Clarion Housing Group at the moment, who will operate that housing on our behalf. I think at our core purpose is developing good quality affordable housing. So our aspiration is very much to get up to that level as part of the delivery of the scheme. The reason that we invest in open market, or we deliver open market for sale, is so that we can reinvest those proceeds back into more affordable housing. And at the end of the day, that's what our business is about. It's about delivering affordable housing. So I think you could have a reasonable level of confidence. In terms of the student accommodation, we haven't yet started all the conversations with potential partners for delivering those units, but I'll certainly take on board the comments that you've made. And then in terms of the landscaping and the play areas, I'll perhaps just refer that over to my colleague who may wish to give you a more detailed answer.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, absolutely agree with everything you said there. It will be very adventurous. The play space is positioned so that as you come off the bridge at a high level, we can take advantage of that level change within the play space and integrate that within the play as well, making it obviously very adventurous. So it won't be a stair, it won't be formal. It will integrate trees and planting within that play space. So it will be very playful and very adventurous and very informal. And then, you know, not just within the confines of that space, it spreads out into the wider park as well through the use of boulders and play along the way routes and that sort of thing.
Can we move on to comments then? Caroline, please.
Thank you, Chair. I really love the concept of the development. I completely support the idea of modular housing for the homeless. I think it's really creative and just what the city needs. I completely appreciate the empathy that you've shown in the architecture with the surrounding buildings and the nature of the area. And for all of those reasons, I think it's a really innovative and welcomed project. Thank you for all of that. Observations based on the presentation that you gave, slide 148 and 151. Having said about the empathy with the surrounding architecture, and I appreciate that these buildings have got to be fit for purpose and therefore built to certain proportions, etc. I think there might be just a bordering on sort of corporateness. I get the material, I get the style, I get the echoing with the surrounding buildings, but there's a degree of uniformity when you're looking at them from that sort of distance on those two slides, in my view. And I'm not sure about those balconies. They do look a bit old corporation to me. I'm sure they're in keeping with what you've looked at before, but I'm just telling you, that's the impression I'm getting as somebody who's looking at this from this distance for the first time. So that was the first point. I love the riverside space, but with regard to the green space, there is a fairly large patch of green space to the right-hand side of slide 151. But other than the riverfront, which I think is beautiful, the green space seems to be very broken up to me. And I'm wondering if the scheme would benefit from a more extensive spot of green space in one area, like a central green or something of that kind. And I'm very pleased to hear what you said about the play, because that was going to be my last question, the nature of the play. And I absolutely welcome the description that you've given about the adventurous play, taking advantage of the different levels and so on. I don't know about other members of the committee, but I would certainly like to have a look at more precisely what's being proposed in both the formal and the informal play areas at some point before you go ahead with those.
Thank you, Caroline. Liz, please.
Yes, I like the linear park idea alongside the river, and I just hope that you are going to plant water-loving trees in this area, because underneath the concrete, the water table will be quite high. The park, which Councillor Gruen has just mentioned, is a little mini park, but I'm afraid it's very much neglected. This was my ward until about 4 years ago. And I do like the fact that on all the roofs there are solar panels, and I hope that they are successful. But I have to say that Councillor Gruen's right. There is a uniformity about all the blocks. And I can see that you've tried to make them look a bit different, but I don't think it quite comes off. And I have to say, it does remind me of the outskirts of St. Petersburg, Leningrad as was, when Khrushchev built a load of high-rise flats interspersed every so few blocks with a shop just looking like the one that's down there. Only the shops in Russia didn't have anything in them, but and it was just soulless, and they did have quite a bit of greenery around it, but it just reminded me of that. So I do think you've got quite a bit more work to do to make the blocks look individual. And I have been to New York 3 times, and I have been to Chicago once. And there, of course, are skyscrapers there, but they're all individual. There isn't that uniformity there. So I'd appreciate it if this were looked at. Thank you.
Liz, I've been to Leningrad. It was Leningrad, and I don't have those recollections. There is the Lubyanka building, I will agree.
I'll
But
tell you where it is, on the way to the Winter Palace. When you drive out of Leningrad, St. Petersburg, you pass them.
we all have this. Okay, it's the street drinking that got me down. Moving on, Graham, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, like everybody else, I was really taken with your presentation. You come across as very genuine people with a genuine proposal for us, and I hope that if it goes forward, that you can deliver in the same tone as you present. I think, like my colleagues, I would like to see a different. Well, yes, you've heard what they've said. I go along with that in terms of the buildings you want to build and how you bring those to us in the form of a proposal, an application. So on that score, I do think it's a great pity that the sort of onerous restrictions we've gone on at the moment mean that you can't sit in on what's gone before. If you'd heard us talking, you'd have some idea of what we think about buildings and buildings in general. And I always think that sort of thing is handy. Might not agree with it, but it would give you an idea. Anyway, I hope it turns into a proposal, and I look forward to seeing it when it does come back. Thank you.
Took me by surprise, Chair. Yeah, I don't know about Leningrad. I think it's very, very attractive. So, I mean, that's just my opinion. I think it's got a lot going for it. The community aspect of it, I think, is really, really strong. I think the design is pretty good. Not Leningrad. Yeah, I think the main thing that it's got going for it though is that amazing green space, because that's a net benefit to the city and connectivity further afield. So like that's really, really quite exciting. And also, of course, should I mean, even with the policy amount of affordable housing coming forward on site, that'd be a massive not a massive gain, but it'd be better than what we've got already locally, which is not a whole lot. Just a bit of context to my comments around that. We've got obviously Rosebank. The head teacher recently ran a housing survey, and out of respondents, 1 in 5 families are living in 1-bedroom accommodation. So if that's not an illustration of housing need, I don't know what is, like locally. So if you can get it so that there's more social rents coming forward, like that'd be much appreciated by me. Thank you.
Kelly, David, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think quite an admirable project. I think I can't wait for you to build it. Really, I think it's really good. I mean, I think there might be some of the comments about the design of it. I think you might need to tweak it a bit and make some bits a little bit different. But generally speaking, all the way around, very good development it'll be. So get on with it.
Thank you, David. And I'm pushed for time. Meeting. Some members have a meeting in 10 minutes. Can we go to? Sorry. Oh, can you? Well, it's not my meeting, but it's other people as well. I think we're all very pleased with this. We were very pleased when we saw it on site. Noble organisation, Clarion, seemed to be, something that we can all support. I'd like to see them do some more work in Leeds apart from this one. But in the meantime, there are some questions for members to put, but it has been very well received, so I don't think we need to prolong it. If we turn to page 230, we've got 4 questions. 4, 1, 2, 3. Yep. On the first one, do members support the proposed use of the site subject to the appropriate sequential tests? That must be a resounding yes. Do members support emerging layout and scale of the development? Yes, definitely. Do members support the emerging approach to highways improvement and parking? Too many cars on the side, but apart from that, we'll move on. Do members support the emerging approach to biodiversity and the public realm? Well, yes, we do. We bells on that one. Thank you. Okay, well, I mean, that will come out, won't it? That will come out. We've time on that one. Can I thank you for bringing such a really good application to us, and you can see how pleased we are from our comments around the table. Hope you can, as some members have said, hope you can get on and build as quickly as possible and bring the full application to us in the very near future. But well done. Thank you. And good evening to all.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much on behalf of Clarion, and thank you very much, councillors, for listening to us this afternoon.